core CPI and core PPI both go down in a very, very strange news cycle because I was told that all of the tariffs that we've been talking about are going to drive inflation through the roof. But we'll talk a bit about the finance, what is happening with that, and where we go following that. In other news, the Donald makes a gigantic Middle East trip, which is preceded by an offer to accept a gift of a $400 million flying palace from the nation of Qatar, leaving a lot of people united against the fact that they don't like the fact that this happened. I'm going to talk about the jet, I'm going to talk about the Middle East trip, and some of my reservations about this. I know a lot of people are screaming illegal, but it's actually not technically illegal. Don't get me wrong, it looks really bad, but it's not technically illegal, so we'll go over all of that, what's happening with that, and where we go from here. Democrats from Congress allegedly storm an ICE facility. Now we're talking about getting more arrests up on the table here. We'll talk about that. And AOC's reaction to all of this, because let me tell you, she is positioning herself for a run at the presidency as well. So we'll talk about that, what's going on there, and where we go with that. And Jake Tapper, in a new book, admits that he probably didn't cover Joe Biden's cognitive decline as well as he should have. So we'll talk a bit about that. It is going to be all of this and a whole bunch more at this point. I can't believe the number of tabs that we have open here, but hey, maybe it's all about news fatigue and keeping people moving from topic to topic so they can't be outraged over one thing or the other. But we'll talk about all of this and more on the other side of the break. So strap yourselves in, find a few friends, get a few people in here, and tune in on your morning commute as opposed to going through the AM radio, because, well, we all know my opinions on that. And we will see you on the other side of the break. And, oh, big Ol Jet Airliner, don't carry me too far away. Oh, big Ol Jet Airliner, because it's here that I've got to stay. I am J. Edgar, and this is Contemporary. I think my homework assignment for the week is going to be look into the Karen Reed trial that I see trending just about the time that it gets started every day, because I don't honestly know what's even going on with that. And I'll give full admission to the fact that I have no idea what's actually happening with that, because, well, the political news has taken such a front seat to absolutely everything. It's been a little bit insane, I'm not going to lie. I think that some of it is, like Deca was just saying, taking the oxygen out of the room. So we've got a ton to go over here today. Like this morning, I got up at 6 because I hadn't really done anything the previous night. There have been a lot of meetings and a few other things that have been popped up in my personal life, and obviously I'm in a family first position. You guys have known that since this channel started, that family first has always been my default position. So I sat here and I said, you know what? I didn't put a lot in the Discord, so I can go ahead and probably get up at 6, have everything done, organized by 7, because it seemed like a slow news week. I know there was a little bit of talk over the Middle East trip, but I hadn't looked into that, and I didn't really see what the depths were on that until this morning. I just started going up and exploring that. So, and then we had the core PPI drop this morning, so I had to add a bunch of stuff for that. And yeah, I mean, at this point, there's over 100 tabs open right now. I don't think we're going to hit all 100, honestly. Just knowing how much our news agencies like to plagiarize off of each other. So I have everything open. A lot of it I've read, some of it I have not, but we'll go over everything that's going on over here at Contemporary. So strap yourselves in, find some friends. No texting and driving if you are on your commute. However, given the fact that I didn't start till almost 9, I think most of my East Coast and Central Time friends are already at their morning job that they took their morning commute from. So I don't think I have to worry too much about that. But still, we've got a lot to go over here today. So strap yourselves in. Let's get started. Before we do, make sure you guys go check out great programming, including the great programming that will immediately follow this programming. The Weekly Notice with Stephen Ignoramus, go check that out. Overruled in Crimeland with Katie Zed, go check that out as well. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And I will actually, at the bottom of the show today, be shouting out another YouTube creator that I very much enjoy, based on a release for a TV show that I very much enjoy, whose revival is coming out. At the top of the show, you probably already know what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about the release poster of that, though, and where this is going to go. So, a lot of different stuff going on here today. Even some music stuff over down on things that I like at the end of the show. So, strap yourselves in, and we'll see what's going on with that over here on Contemporary. Long is first. Jake Tapper admits, gee, you think? Yeah, we know that. Decca is lurking in a work meeting. Be able to listen in later. You know, Decca, you can do that one thing that Quest Fanning likes to do, where you go start in watching the show wherever it was that you left off, and then just put it up at double speed until you catch up with the rest of it. I know that's always fun, and hear what's going on here. Vong, and hey Decca, what's up? Mostly nitrogen. Yeah, taking the oxygen out of the room. I see where we're going with that one. And Decca says, makes sense why more people around me are brain dead. Lack of oxygen. Drum roll, please. I'll put that on a sounder on my Stream Deck. Still have not organized the Stream Deck. Life takes first, family comes first. And actually, we'll be talking a bit about that down at the bottom of the show, too. Some frustrations that I have with government regulations and family as well. Yeah, there's going to be a lot. There's going to be just a major mixed bag of stuff going on here today. So strap yourselves in, and let's see what we can get done today over here on Contemporary. Let's get started. Let's start with the Dow today. Let's start with what's going on with that and where we go from that. Where's my cursor? There it is. All right, the Dow right now is sitting down 98.8 points, 41,952.26 after a major tumble on futures. Looking at the previous close and where everything started, looks like it was almost not quite 1,000. But probably a good 300-400 point drop on the futures overnight last night. So it looks like it's trying to struggle back up. We'll see what happens throughout the day. The yesterday was not doing so well either. There was a major jump on the 12th, it looks like, and that seems to have come from when the China talks came out. And I know a lot of our friends on the left are trying to say that this was the Trump man caved, the evil Trump man caved. Oh my God, he caved. He caved. What are we going to do? Nobody's going to have jobs anymore that we wanted to ship over there anyway. What are we going to do? We'll talk about that as it comes off here, but a little bit of struggle coming off the morning here. We'll talk about what's happening with that. Let's grab one from IVD from the morning, which it does look like they have stopped giving me the refresh and the paywall stuff. So let's come back up to the top here. Futures fall as United Health dives on probe, Walmart rises, CoreWeave tumbles. Well, Walmart's going to rise, obviously, when we sit back and talk about what's happening with China news because, well, I don't know if you've been in a Walmart lately, but there's a lot of cheap Chinese crap in that place. Definitely is. I will admit that there's some decent stuff. There's some American-made stuff in there, but a lot of the stuff that they have in there is cheap Chinese crap. This is from Ed Carson. Dow futures fell early Thursday along with the S&P and the Nasdaq futures. Dow giant United Health plunged on a reported criminal probe, while Nvidia-backed cloud computing IPO CoreWeave and China's Alibaba fell solidly on quarterly results, partially because the majority of the first quarter was under the threat and then the inclusion of tariff, I would have to guess. Dow giants Walmart and Cisco Systems rose on earnings. The stock market rally had a mixed Wednesday, with Nvidia and Tesla continuing to lead and masking some modest underlying weakness, but the broader trend remains highly bullish. CoreWeave stock is on the IBD 50. United Health tumbled early Thursday after the Wall Street Journal reported that the Dow Jones insurer faced a criminal probe for Medicare fraud. UNH stock dove on Tuesday after United Health warned on medical costs once again and said its CEO was stepping down, probably because he doesn't want to get shot in the middle of New York City by a crazed Italian man who the opponents of healthcare want to pardon. Dick's Sporting Goods will pay $2.4 billion for Foot Locker, confirming a Wall Street Journal report. Dick's stock fell while Foot Locker stock skyrocketed. Stupid Dick's, I'm telling you. That is not a language thing, by the way. Do keep in mind that I do try to keep my language cleaned up on the morning show because of the fact that people are doing the morning commute thing, taking their kids to school, etc. But Dick's Sporting Goods, that's the name of the company, and they are stupid dicks. I was surprised too. I was trying to think the last time I've actually seen a Foot Locker even. I don't think I've seen one for a good 4 or 5 years at this point. Pom and I were talking about that when I saw the trend going on, because it was trending on X while I was getting everything set up, and she thinks that there's one in the La Crosse Mall. I only stepped foot in there a couple times. Now that I'm thinking about it really hard, though, I think that she is right, and I think I know where it is, but I didn't go in there, obviously. But yeah, Foot Locker, where do you see those anymore? I do sometimes question, too, what the wisdom was behind putting your workers in a uniform of a referee while you're talking about a locker. Like, you'd think you'd want sports jerseys or player stuff like that, not a referee's uniform. I don't know. On the futures, which are over at this point, the Dow futures lost 0.35% versus fair value, with United Health hitting blue chips, while Walmart and Cisco helped the S&P. The S&P futures fell 0.45%, and the Nasdaq was down over 0.5% at 0.55. The 10-year Treasury yield dipped to 4.52%, which is crazy because it was up as high as it was already. Crude oil futures fell more than 3% as Trump raised hopes of a U.S.-Iran nuclear deal. So that could affect your gas prices as well. I know that it's been a bit of a yo-yo currently as far as the gas prices go, but I put gas back in at $2.79 the other day. That was pretty cool, but it's already back up to $3.04 in this area. Investors will also get a slew of economic data at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, including the April sales and retail PPI, the Philly Fed Manufacturing Index, and weekly jobless claims, which we'll be talking a bit about that as well later on. So, a lot of stuff moving, a lot of stuff shaking, and really a lot of motion in stocks. We'll see what happens with that. And like I said, we're seeing some rise go on here, that's for sure. Let's grab one. I got a bunch of finance stuff here from ABC News. Inflation is dropping, but these prices are still soaring. Prices are rising rapidly for some everyday items like coffee and beef, which the beef I'm a little bit surprised at with the tariff regime going on and China saying that they weren't going to buy U.S. products. I mean, a lot of our food goes to China either for feeding their massive amounts of people or for processing. So realistically, if we take them out of the market, which it doesn't look like we have anymore, then that should make beef prices fall because, hey, if we flood our markets with it and we don't have enough people to buy it, we want to make it accessible for more people, Rather sell at a loss than not sell at all, you know. Inflation cooled in the aftermath of Trump's Liberation Day levies last month, dropping to a 4-year low and defying fears of a tariff-driven price hikes, government data this week showed. Even egg prices, a symbol of the rising cost, fell about 10% in April compared to the previous months. Still, prices for some products continue to soar, including everyday items such as coffee and beef. It's normal for some prices to rise as much as faster pace than overall inflation, said Omar Sharif, founder and president of the research firm Inflation Insights. The impact, he added, depends on the role the items play in a given person's finances. And yeah, I mean, coffee has always been a big one for the American people. So if it's going to get harder to get it outside of the U.S., then yeah, we're gonna struggle a bit with this. And I know, like, it's really hard in the U.S. to do a mass production coffee. We don't really have the temperate climate for it. Well, the warmer to temperate climate for it. So I know a lot of people who will keep a coffee bush. I wanted to have a coffee bush for a while. I just didn't really have the space for it in the little closet you guys know that I used to live in. But I'd like to get one in and actually do a little bit of roasting myself and see what I can do just to maybe even cut off some of the costs of $7.99, $8.99, $9.99 a pound for decent coffee. I grew up on Folgers, but man, it is hard to keep that stomach down after I had a little bit of a change in heart and coffee. But, you know, first world problems, of course. At the end of the day, what's important is the weight of the price change on your budget, Sharif said, noting stubborn price hikes for some goods may be offset by price drops for others. And I have been seeing some price drops in some products, so we'll see what happens with that. Here's what to know about which prices are still climbing and what's behind the trend. Coffee prices soared 9.6% in April compared to a year ago, marking inflation 4 times higher than the overall rate. Instant coffee prices climbed even faster, jumping 13.5% over the past year. The spike in coffee prices comes down to a dearth of supply alongside robust demand, meaning too many dollars are chasing after too few coffee beans, David Ortega, a food economist at Michigan State, told ABC News. Recent droughts in Vietnam and Brazil, 2 of the world's largest coffee producers, have restricted global output, Ortega said. These price increases are primarily driven by weather shocks, Ortega added. So some of the people doing coffee beans at their home could actually offset some of the market on that. Not a huge deal, but a little bit. Beef, a spike in beef prices also stems from a supply shortage that traces back to drought conditions, Ortega said. Ground beef soared 10% in April compared to a year ago, while the cost of beef steaks increased 7% over that period, the government data showed. In 2022, a major drought from the beef-producing regions of the U.S. forced cattle herders to sell off more animals than usual, since the drought raised the costs for cattle feed, which in turn made it more expensive for ranchers to maintain their herds, Ortega said. Many of those ranchers, he added, sold off cattle as necessary to produce future beef supply. The national beef herd is at its lowest level in decades, and demand is strong, Ortega said. While these two things meet each other, you get this big rise in prices. Car repairs. Know a little bit about that one. Car repairs soared 7.6% in April compared to a year earlier, amounting to inflation 3 times higher than the overall rate. The trend owes in large part to the rise of high-tech cars equipped with features like rear-view cameras and traffic sensors, which have added cost to even some routine repairs, Brian Moody, executive editor at Auto Trader, told ABC News. A shortage of workers, and that's the big one right there too, by the way. It's not necessarily the technical aspect of it, it's the lack of people. Has exacerbated the cost woes for repair companies as they bolster competition to attract and retain employees, sending prices higher, Moody added. Yep. When the labor cost goes up, your labor cost goes up. More people want technology in their cars, Moody said. We'll be talking about the opposite of that at the bottom of the show, at things that I like, by the way. That technology requires greater skill to manage and fix, but at the same time, there's a shortage of technicians and workers. And outerwear, of course. Overall apparel prices dropped slightly over the year, ending in April, but some items still deliver sticker shock for spring shoppers. Prices for men's outerwear, including suits and sport coats, climbed 5.3% over the year ending in April, which amounts to inflation more than double the overall rate. Women's outerwear costs, which include jackets, coats, and vests, surged even faster, climbing 6.2%. Sharif of Inflation Insights said the reason for these price increases is murky since they have coincided with a much slower rise in costs for producers of men's outerwear and an outright drop in production costs for women's outerwear. The ample supply of such products means the price hikes likely result from quirks in consumer taste, potentially resulting from the prices commanded by specialty brands, Sharif added. I'd be curious if there's a secondary driver to this as well, with a large amount in the work from home contingent starting to go away, and work from home government, especially people going out here and now having to go pound the pavement for some of these local jobs where they feel they have to dress up to go back in the office, where, I mean, at home they put on a nice button-up shirt and sat in their shorts on here. I will not confirm nor deny that I'm sitting here in pajama shorts right now doing the news from a work from home office myself. So I think a lot of that might be some of the driver for this as well. Same thing with car repairs too. I mean, people that did a lot of work from home didn't need to look, or could put off some of the car repairs, and now in addition to the shortage of techs, if people are starting to go back out and again pound the pavement for the job or have to go do the commute again after 5 years of pandemic-fueled lockdownerism and such like that, then yeah, I could see a price hike going on with that as well. Real news too, not fake news. Yeah, we've got a mix of both, I think. Your fake news. What else do we have here? Treasury yields tick lower as investors await more inflation data from Brian Evans and Sauda by Maya. Which, by the way, I wanted to see if there was anything up this morning about the producer price index as well. That was dropping as I was organizing stuff and nobody had anything out yet. Yes, there is, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. Treasury yields moved lower on Thursday as investors awaited a batch of economic data and more insights on inflation amid a U.S.-China trade agreement. The 10-year yield declined by just over 1 basis point to 1 basis point to 4.513%, and the 2-year yield fell by more than 2 basis points to 4.028%. 1 basis point is equivalent to 0.01%, and the yields and prices move in the opposite directions. Investors are anticipating a series of economic data on Thursday, which will offer more insight into the state of the U.S. economy after President Trump introduced reciprocal tariffs in April. Investors were buoyed by a tame inflation reading on Tuesday, with consumer prices rising at the slowest pace than economists expected. Inflation increased by 0.2% in April, excluding food and energy, below the consensus forecast of 0.3%. The PPI, another inflation measure, will be published on Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Investors will look to retail sales data, and industrial production numbers for April. Weekly jobless claims are also due. Optimism remains about the U.S. striking trade deals on tariffs with other countries, with the UK securing a trade agreement last week, and the U.S. and China pausing most tariffs for 90 days. U.S. levies on China previously stood at 145%, while China retaliated with tariffs of 125% on U.S. imports, which is very surprising because they were always high on U.S. imports to begin with. So, a lot of stuff that moves there. Let's grab one. Yeah, we still have a bunch of finance stuff before we get into the jetliner news. The New York Times, briefly from this one, U.S. inflation stable ahead of expected jump from tariffs. Which seems to be old news at this point because, hey, now we've got to go back and change that narrative. From Colby Smith. Briefly, U.S. inflation held steady in April in what economists warn could be a final lull before a likely surge in consumer prices because of President Trump's trade war. These people, by the way, want so bad for there to be 12.5% inflation and the American people struggling and losing jobs and a crash of the economy. It's a little bit sick in my mind, I'm not going to lie. The Consumer Price Index rose 2.3% from a year earlier, slightly below the previous month's annual increases. Data released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed on Tuesday. Over the course of a month, prices rose 0.2%, an acceleration compared to March's 0.1% decline. A closely watched measure of the underlying inflation, which strips out volatile food and energy items, climbed 2.8% compared with the same time last year. In line with March's year-over-year rise, on a monthly basis, prices rose 0.2% slightly, outpacing the previous month's 0.1% increase. The data comes on the heels of a significant U-turn from the Trump admin on its tariffs with China following negotiations over the weekend. Officials in Washington and Beijing agreed to temporarily reduce tariffs on each other's products for 90 days. We'll be talking about that after the Middle East trip, of course. So, we'll see what happens with this. And the last one, before we look at PPI, which was breaking this morning. Jerome Powell back in the news from Reuters. Fed's Powell strategy around both jobs and inflation needs to be reconsidered. Gee, you think? I mean, we're sitting here in a position, realistically, where if you're wanting to keep the rates high, the only reason is because you want to make it so that we can't come back out and produce jobs. The inflation is down. Yes, the spending ability is down as well. So we don't have a lot of monetary velocity going on right now. You're getting the mass layoffs that you said that you wanted to have in order to get... I mean, Powell himself said that he wanted to see 12.5% unemployment before he started bringing the rates back down. Which, without the massive hiring spree of the government for the government employees, we actually might have seen under the Biden administration. But they were able to come back and use New Deal tactics in order to keep us afloat for at least a little while. But let's read from this one here. U.S. Federal Reserve officials feel they need to reconsider the key elements around both jobs and inflation in their current approach to monetary policy, given the inflation experience of the last few years, and the possibility that supply shocks and the associated price increases may become more frequent in the years ahead. Jerome Powell said on Thursday. We may be entering a period of more frequent and potentially more persistent supply shocks, a difficult challenge for the economy and central banks, Powell said in opening remarks of a two-day conference reconsidering the Fed's current approach to monetary policy adopted in 2020 as the economy was still scarred from the pandemic. The economic environmental has changed rather significantly since 2020, and our review will reflect our assessment of those changes, Powell said. Powell did not focus on current monetary policy or the economic outlook, though he did say he expected April's personal consumption expenditures price inflation to have fallen to 2.2%, a tepid reading, but still not reflecting coming tariff-driven price increases. Still, that reflects a historically unusual result of disinflation without major damage to the economy, a soft landing that did take place under the Fed's current strategy. 5 years ago, the Fed recast its approach to allow more room for lower unemployment rates and pledged to use periods of high inflation to offset years in which inflation was weak, a common occurrence from 2010 to 2019. The inflation that took off after that, the emerging state of the global economy, means that the approach may need a rethink, Powell said. So, it does need a rethink. We need to come back out and look at this. And one of the things that I struggle with when I look at the Fed is when we look at the tariff war and one of the hopeful outcomes of it. And I don't know necessarily how the Trump administration is looking at this. I think that they're just looking to kind of shock some people into lowering their own tariffs. But the workers on the ground's expectation of it is that the tariffs are going to drive American producers to do more production in the US. I mean, there still is a very, very solid core of people who, because of their families, because of what they want to do, because of the fact that they want to raise families, would accept working in a factory. As long as it's air conditioned, of course. That is a shrinking number as we go along, but there is still that core of people who don't really have a lot of other prospects other than going to the military once they get out of high school and don't have a direction. With the hope, of course, that they can take the knowledge that they took from the factory work and start out a machine shop or start off something of their own in a small business format, of course. The factory owners don't want that, but it's definitely always a possibility in the US with the American dream. So, but going back to where the Fed was concerned, if you do continue to make it harder to go back and borrow the money to build the factory, then yeah, you're not going to start bringing some of that production back here. Palm is here. Palm needs a nap. Yeah. I need a nap too. Maybe we can do that together later. I don't know. Alright. Let's talk about PPI here for just a bit before we go talk about the airliner. Trump's big, beautiful $400 million gift from Qatar. But I will admit that I'm not 100% thrilled with. Let's grab one from CNN. We'll talk about that one. Powell warns of more volatile inflation as latest data shows impact from tariffs. That is not the article that I was saying. There we go. U.S. wholesale prices sank in April. So the headline is misleading, is where I was going with this one. U.S. wholesale prices sank in April, logging their biggest monthly drop since COVID stifled the economy, as tariffs put a squeeze on profit margins, according to new data released on Thursday. The PPI, a closely watched measurement of wholesale inflation, showed Thursday the prices paid to the U.S. producers dropped 0.5% in April from the month before, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data. On an annual basis, inflation slowed to 2.4% from 3.4% in March. Economists were expecting monthly prices to rise by 0.2% and to slow to 2.4% on an annual basis from the initial estimate of 2.7%, according to FactSet. A driving force behind the downward monthly swing was a 1.7% plunge in trade services, a category that measures gross margins for wholesale and retailers. Although it's a volatile category, the sharp downward swing in trade services indicates that companies' margins are being eaten away by higher costs from Trump's tariffs. Joe Bruce-Willis, chief economist at RSM US, told CNN on Thursday. We're beginning to see the impact of trade policy filtering into the hard data in such a way that it's impossible to deny is now affecting revenues and profit margins for firms, Bruce-Willis said. And for the first time in 8 years, CNN is going to advocate publicly, now they'll still do it privately of course, but advocate publicly for their billionaire donor class to go back and make more money. They do it privately because their donor class pays them, but publicly they have to come back out for the progressives out there and say, billionaire bad, business leader bad. Those higher costs will likely start spilling over to consumers soon, he said. And consumers are already showing some signs of fatigue. Sales at U.S. retailers slowed sharply in April to 0.1% after a surge of 1.7% in March, when shoppers rushed to beat the slew of new tariffs. Separately on Thursday, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warned that supply shocks could force the central bank to keep rates higher over the long term. So, and again, there's probably a lot of things, other factors that are going with the drop in prices. Number one, of course, as they said here, people heard tariffs, so they went back out and tried to go stock up before the supply of pre-tariff items was gone. And that's probably both on retail stuff like TVs, cell phones, cars, car components, but also canned goods, toilet paper, food, etc. There's a level of that, but there is also a distinct level of the fact that, yes, a lot of the probationary employees, the newest hired in the government in New Deal style policies, are not in government work anymore. And, well, especially if they're the more inexperienced people, they're not seeing the same level of salary that they saw in their cushy government jobs. So yes, this all makes sense except for the strategy, obviously, but the data that's coming out here makes 100% sense. Alright. Well, we're in the title card portion of the show now, so I think it's time for us to go back and get started. I'm going to skip this one. CNN with some propaganda. Uh-oh. There we go. Bong says the SBA is doing a lot to help people start up small machine shops right now. Put stuff like that in the Discord. I mean, I'm glad you put it in the chat, but let's get a discussion going on that too, because I know like Deca and Jeep and Midget B to a lesser extent, they'll start to come back and find articles that are coming back and supporting this as well. We can get a good conversation going on that. And I mean, that's stuff that I like to see as well, is discussion on industry. I was thinking about this a little bit earlier too. I know we're about to go talk about the airplane that launched 1,000 tweets, but, well, more like 1,000,000 tweets. But just before we get into this stuff, I want to talk a bit about where we are at nationally. Because we really don't have a lot of, I don't want to say idolization, but I think that would be the closest word, of industry like we used to have when we were, well, in generations before, I should say. A lot of modern music is talking about, you know, dating, unfortunately being a whore and things like that. And there was a little bit of that kind of stuff in the 70s, but like there's no real big talk about industry in modern art anymore. I mean, some of the biggest TV shows from the early 2000s were about a lucky jingle writer, hotshot research assistants and researchers, architects, judges, and things like that. But I mean, when we look back at the TV that came out of the 70s and the 80s, the protagonists, the main characters were cops, factory workers, and general office workers at that point. People went down to the office, ran reports, did meetings, or went to the factory in the case of All in the Family or things like that, or Family Matters, the factory worker. You had a couple of different ones, like, you know, well, even Step by Step, it was a construction worker and a hairstylist. It was more industrially based. Whereas, like, now it's, you know, like I said, the jingle writer, the architect, the researchers, the high-end career people. But I even noticed it in music, though, too. Like, we don't get a lot of things that are advocating for run-of-the-mill work anymore. Like, one of the biggest songs in the 60s was Johnny Cash talking about going to work at a factory. A GM factory, in fact. The thought occurred to me when I was listening to the Grateful Dead song Truckin', because, well, I was throwing lines from that into a different tweet thread. But, you know, you don't hear somebody talking about transporting stuff anymore anywhere in the news. You don't. It's a taboo career for people to have, and I think that's part of the reason that people are being driven out, and a lot of these jobs are being driven out of the country. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald is another great song where it's just talking about a ship that's carrying, I believe it was iron, going across Lake Michigan. So there's not a lot of advocate for industry anymore, and I think we should change that. Now, the music producers out there probably aren't going to change that, but I think that we should. I really do. Alright, let's go from Newsweek. Let's get back into the title card here. Qatar's gift to Trump is an unsold plane it's been trying to dump for years. Yes, earlier in the news, TLDR, earlier in the week. a lot of people on the left and even some people on the right started to freak out about the fact that Qatar is gifting a $400 million Boeing super luxury jet on paper to Donald Trump. Now, there are some caveats to this. Before I talk about the caveats, though, I will say right off, nothing that is involved in this story is illegal. I checked over it. I checked the laws and everything through there. I checked the paper trail into this. Nothing that's happening right now is illegal. Nothing violates the Emoluments Clause. TLDR, Qatar is not actually gifting the plane to Trump. They are gifting it to the Air Force to be used as Air Force One, and then at the conclusion of the Trump presidency, the plane is to be retired and given out to the Donald Trump National Library, therefore keeping it in federal government hands. So it sidesteps the Emoluments Clause, and it does not go directly to him. But with that being said, of course, I'm still not 100% thrilled by that. I look at the fact that, and I think that some of the stuff is being done just to drive the news cycle, to take the oxygen out of the room, or the nitrogen, as Decca and Vong were talking about earlier, but to really move this and keep people outraged, keep people talking while other stuff is going on in the background. The Biden admin, not Biden himself. The Biden admin was masters at this one. They could go back out and do something, or put the crazy guy out and have him fall over on his bike, and keep the news cycle driven with, their people in the news cycle trying to keep the focus on the fact that Biden fell down and trying to cover tracks for all this and say, oh no, he's not in mental decline, while the MAGA people went out and screamed that he's in mental decline. Meanwhile, they're moving something about student loan forgiveness around in the background where nobody can see. So a lot of this, it seems to me like it's sleight of hand as well, where the Trump administration is trying to come back out and keep people outraged while they go back and move trade deals around. Because realistically, until I started, because I unfortunately listened to Shapiro a little bit yesterday while I was in the shower, and heard a bit about the Middle East trip, but if you just paid attention to X, all that we heard about for the entire week was this airplane. Meanwhile, we've got a trade deal that benefits Washington State more than anything with Boeing, and 160 planes going to Qatar, $1.2 trillion worth of trade going into the Middle East, with American-made goods going into these countries. But all we hear about is this plane and the Emoluments Clause. But let's hear a little bit what's going on with this one from Newsweek. The Boeing 747-8 being offered to U.S. President Trump by Qatar once served the Qatari royal family and has been sitting unsold for years. The jet, a lavishly configured version of Boeing's largest passenger aircraft, has been lingering without a buyer since being put up for sale in 2020, according to the aircraft listings and aviation analysts. Trump has publicly expressed frustration with Boeing's years-long delay in delivering two modified 747s for presidential use. The president has argued that by accepting Qatar's offer, he can bypass delays and save U.S. taxpayers money. Critics, however, fear the acceptance would be unethical and even unconstitutional. Two things, by the way, that are not true, but it's still, it doesn't look good on paper no matter what. Plus, Fanning just unloaded the groceries, so he'll be way behind for a while. Plus, Fanning's going to do the double speed thing like I was talking about for Decca earlier. To meet Air Force One standards, the plane would need extensive modifications, including secure communications, nuclear blast shielding, and missile defense systems. The aircraft was commissioned for Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jaber Al Thani, Qatar's former prime minister, and delivered in 2012 at a list price of $367 million. Not including the interior, which likely cost tens of millions of dollars. The customized interior, designed by Paris-based cabinet Pinto, Features sycamore and wakapu wood finishes, silk fabrics, and space for 89 passengers in a configuration that includes 2 bedrooms and entertainment and meeting rooms. Despite its luxury interior, the plane has failed to find a buyer since being put on the market in 2020. The Qatar Amiri flight, which manages the royal family's aircraft, still retains a fleet of similar planes. One of the 2 other 747-8s appears inactive, and a similar jet was gifted to the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan in 2018 after failing to sell. Ben Schlappig, writing an aviation blog, 1 Mile at a Time 2020, said the aircraft offered to Trump had flown 1,069 hours since its delivery in 2012, averaging about 2 hours a week. John Goglia, a former member of the National Transportation Safety Board, told Forbes that giving the 747-8 to the U.S. would allow the Qataris to avoid maintenance costs that were only getting higher with the 747 fleet shrinking worldwide and fewer mechanics available who know how to work on them. Are we off? Or did Game Chops go down? We're still on. Are we losing frames? No, everything's staying live. No, I was losing music in my ears. And I didn't know why. Hopefully you don't have an issue with Cutman. Alright, Palm says, I don't know, I personally don't see much of an issue with the plane for the reasons you've already outlined. Yeah. The problem that a lot of things that are going on with that are... And they've been trying to throw the emoluments clause at Trump from the beginning because of the fact that he has so much property in so many of the other countries it has since his initial presidency, the first time through. Let's go back onto this one. Commenting on Qatar's offer, the U.S. President Trump wrote on Truth Social on Sunday, "The Boeing 747 is being given to the U.S. Air Force Department of Defense, not to me. It is a gift from a nation, Qatar, that we have successfully defended for many years. It will be used by our government as a temporary Air Force One until such a time that our new Boeings, which are very late on delivery, arrive. Why should our military, and therefore our taxpayers, be forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars when they can get it free from a country that wants to reward us for a job well done? The big savings will be spent instead to make America great again," all capitals of course. "Only a fool would not accept this gift on behalf of our country." So, and there are pros and cons to this as well. Now, of course, the pros are the fact that the base plane and the luxury accommodations that go with the plane are coming for free to the United States. But yes, there are going to need to be millions of dollars taken to outfit this to be Air Force One, as they talked about, the nuclear shielding, the communications, missile defense systems, etc. There will need to be things done in order to make this a legit plane. Now, with that being said, there are other issues as well. Typically, Air Force One, they run 2 of those in the sky in 2 separate places, so you don't know where the president is. Pam and I also talked about that when we talked about where this all went and how this was legal or not. You lose that specific part of defense because, well, it's a one-of-a-kind plane. As they mentioned earlier in the article, there are 2 Air Force Ones that are being built by Boeing getting ready to go to the United States. And regardless to any of this, if this plane does get gifted to the United States, to the Defense Department, then how much of a delay is it going to be getting it upfitted and outfitted to be Air Force One on top of all of this? So there are some issues that go along with that direction, but there's also and Benny Boy pointed it out himself, that Qatar doesn't give stuff away for free. they want something back in return for this. So, I'm not thrilled with it. It's all legal. It's all above board. But I still don't think it looks good, realistically. GOP lawmakers are on the same page here. From the Hill, GOP lawmakers signal discomfort with Trump Qatar jet Middle East diplomacy. Well, I mean, the GOP lawmakers are always going to be uncomfortable with Middle East diplomacy because there's still a lingering faction of the Bushites who want to say, go turn that Middle East into glass. Let's go in there and make sure that there ain't no more Arabs out there to go fly airplanes into our buildings. That kind of bullshit. Excuse my language. From Alexander Bolton. Republican lawmakers are raising concerns about elements of President Trump's trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, expressing discomfort about the president's decision to accept a luxury jet from Qatar, and voicing reservations about the lucrative Trump family business dealings in Qatar and the UAE. Republicans on Capitol Hill are also asking whether Trump has done enough to loop Israel into negotiations with Houthi rebels in Yemen and his admin's talks with Iran over its nuclear program. Trump announced a deal to stop bombing Houthi shortly before his trip, and his admin negotiations with Iran are ongoing. The president's controversial decision to accept a $400 million Boeing 747-8 from Qatar serves as the next Air Force One, before eventually transitioning into Trump's future presidential library, has gotten the strongest pushback from GOP lawmakers. Todd Young of Indiana, a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said he wasn't comfortable with Trump using the jet from Qatar to become his mobile command center in the sky. I'm not comfortable accepting it, he said. I think there are national security concerns that need to be addressed about listening devices, safety specs, and potential other issues. Reasonable concerns to have. 100%. Now, do I have faith that the Secret Service is going to go through that plane with a fine-tooth comb and make sure there are no listening devices, safety specs, and potentially other issues? I feel safe in the assumption that they're going to go back out and do that, and I would hope that Trump's private security goes out and does that after a certain event in Butler, Pennsylvania. We will ask that those be addressed, he added. Decca says, I thought Qatar has been getting training and other stuff from America already, which amounts to more than the value of the Boeing. Yes, we've been doing a lot with that. But again, it is a Middle Eastern country. It is an Arab-run country, so in general, they typically don't just give stuff away for free. Ted Cruz warned that the gift of the plane poses significant espionage and surveillance problems. I'm not a fan of Qatar, and I think they have a really disturbing pattern of funding theocratic lunatics. Hold on. I have to process that coming from Ted Cruz. Oh, man. That's going to take me a moment. Wow. Wow, my glasses are really, really dirty. No wonder I can't read the screen. Theocratic lunatics who want to murder us. Coming from a theocratic lunatic who 20 years ago wanted to murder them. My first position has always been anti-war. Funding Hamas and Hezbollah, and that's a real problem, he said on Tuesday on CNBC's Squawk Box. John Thune of South Dakota told reporters that there'd be plenty of scrutiny from the Qatari airplane deal if it's finalized. Qatar's track record of supporting groups hostile to the U.S. interests is making Republican senators uneasy about Trump's family's involvement in a $5.5 billion plan to build a beachside luxury community and golf resort in Qatar. The Trump family company announced the deal on April 30th, 2 weeks before the president was scheduled to depart for the Middle East. GOP senators are also privately voicing their concern about the Trump family stake in crypto company involved in a $2 billion transaction with the Emirati firm based in Abu Dhabi. Yes, that actually is a real place, by the way. That's not just where Garfield mailed Nermal in the cartoons. There actually really is a real Abu Dhabi. A Republican senator who requested anonymity said Trump needs to be mindful of how his business deals in foreign countries appear to Americans at a time when he's reaching out to those countries diplomatically. That's a fair point. It's very, very easy for progressives to come back out and say that he's using the office to enrich himself, while we have a bunch of Ron DeSantis's and Jeb Bush's and Mike Pence's waiting in the wings for Trump to be ineligible to run for a third term, looking to wrest the control of the party back out from them. I would say you would want to go be mindful of that. I'm not the biggest MAGA fan in the world, but I will come outright quickly with my arms raised and say, it's better than the Bushite wing of the party. And I do not want those people to ever have control of the Republican Party again. I don't want the Republican Party to be controlled by people that make Democrats look like the better option. Because have you seen how nutsoids those people have got? There's image and reality, and both are important. The appearance of relationships and things that result from those relationships affect trust. The lawmaker warned we need to make certain that public officials are clean in the transactions that they do. The Washington Post, where democracy goes to die in darkness, reported Tuesday that an entity affiliated with the Trump and his family has a 60% stake in the crypto company World Liberty Financial, which is involved in the $2 billion transaction with UAE-backed investment firm MGX. A second Republican senator who requested anonymity said the Trump family's business dealings in Qatar and the UAE are creating optics problem and criticized the president's decision to accept the luxury jet from Qatar as flagrantly poor judgment. There's awareness that could not look right, the senator said, of potential conflicts of interest posed by Trump's family business dealings. It's coming into higher profile with this Air Force One proposal coming out of Qatar, the lawmaker added. It's going to be hard not to recognize what we're seeing. Publicly, GOP senators are reacting cautiously to Trump's business interests in Qatar and the UAE. Tom Tillis said Trump needs to be transparent in his business deals to address accusations that he's self-dealing or enriching himself and his family. Again, a very fair point. All that just has to pass transparency, he said Wednesday. I think the best way to address it is to make very clear that there are legal business transactions and be transparent about it. Trump's trip has given Democrats a chance to play offense and accuse the president of corruption. Chuck Schumer said Trump's trip to the Middle East seems less like a presidential visit and more like a personal business venture. Golf courses by the beach, hotel openings in Dubai, billions of investments towards Trump's stablecoins, all of that enriches Donald Trump, he said on the Senate floor. Is that what American foreign policy is all about? To make the president richer? He called on the Senate Republicans to speak up. Some of our Republican colleagues, to their credit, have said that they have some concerns about the Qatar deal. Well, how about showing it? How about showing some outrage? Rick Scott, one of Trump's staunchest allies, said the families of prominent politicians and office holders need to understand that their business dealings will come under scrutiny. You never want to prevent someone from being able to do business, he said, but he expressed strong distrust in the Qatari government. So, and there is a lot that's moving here. There's a lot of stuff that's going on with this as well. Now, As far as the Middle East trip is concerned, and we'll talk about this in a couple articles later when we talk about what's going on with the broader Middle East conversation, is that the attempt seems to be to enrich the Middle Eastern nations so that they come into a point of peace with each other because they're so prosperous and profitable that they don't need to have petty squabbles over land. I don't know how well that's going to work because the entire region, from the Sinai Peninsula all the way up into the mountainous regions of Afghanistan, has been in petty squabbles for land, recorded in literature that most of us have somewhere in our houses. Mine is not in my office as it usually is. It's out in the bookshelf out there. In a book that's typically black with gold lettering, talking about petty land squabbles in that region for give or take about 5,000 years. I'm willing to try because I don't want to sit back and see another major Middle East war led by neoconservatives for their own benefit through companies like Halliburton and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. But that still doesn't make it so that I know how well that's going to work. So there's a lot of stuff moving with this, and really honestly I can see it from both sides. I'm going to skip this one just because we talked a lot about the different politicians coming out for it and against it in the other article. But I want to go back and talk to Schumer a little bit more because, I mean, he's taking this to another level beyond what the GOP senators were talking about here. From the Daily Wire, Schumer moves to inflict pain on Trump over $400 million flying palace from Qatar. From Daniel Chayton. On Tuesday, Chuck Schumer said he would slow the process of confirming political nominees for the Department of Justice until more clarity is given on Trump's plan to receive a roughly $400 million luxury aircraft known as the Flying Palace from Qatar. The move comes after sources told ABC News that Pam Bondi provided a legal memo to the White House lawyer David Warrington, and they determined it was legally permissible for the donation of the 747-8 jumbo jet to be conditioned on transferring ownership to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation shortly before the end of the president's term. Let's listen.
Madam President, news of the Qatari government gifting Donald Trump a $400 million private jet to use as Air Force One is so corrupt that even Putin would give a double take. This is not just naked corruption, it is also a grave national security threat. So in light of the deeply troubling news of a possible Qatari-funded Air Force One and the reports that the Attorney General personally signed off on this clearly unethical deal, I am announcing a hold on all DOJ political nominees until we get more answers. Here are some questions that must be answered. First, I call on the DOJ's Foreign Agent Registration Act Unit, or the FARA unit, to do its job and disclose all activities by Qatari foreign agents inside the U.S. that could benefit President Trump or the Trump Organization. Since Attorney General Bondi took charge, the Department of Justice has not been doing its job when it comes to FARA. The FARA unit needs to enforce the law and inform the public of all activities, not just on this luxury plane deal, but all deals involving foreign countries in the Middle East and President Trump, his family, and the Trump Organization. Second, with regard to this $500 million private jet deal, the American people deserve to know the facts. President Trump has told the American people this is, quote, a free jet. Does that mean the Qataris are delivering a ready on day one plane with all the security measures already built in? If so, who installed those security measures? And how do we know they were properly installed? Why would we take the risk of trusting any foreign country to do this sensitive work? If not, what security modifications would be needed to ensure a foreign-sourced Air Force One is safe to use?
Schumer brings up a great point, and that's something that we touched on the very, very first article. When we started talking about this is the fact that, yes, there's security concerns from a foreign-owned jet. It wasn't foreign-built. It was actually built in Puget Sound, but from a foreign-owned jet coming as being a gift to the United States. But, and again, we talked about this in the very first article. They're not going to, the Secret Service, no matter how much they hate the person that they're protecting right now, is not going to take this airplane over immediately and put it right into the service as Air Force One. That would be a stupid thing to do. In fact, if they did that, I would actually start listening to the MAGA people's concerns about the fact that they're just out to go back and get him, and he needs to have more private security because the Secret Service is a part of the, quote, and I quote, deep state. So yes, they absolutely should be going through here, installing their new security measures, going through and sweeping for that. I'm okay with this. Why? Because it's a common sense thing to do. But I mean, holding up business over this, as opposed to what they're usually holding up business over, it's, number one, it's political gamesmanship. It's Schumer coming out here and making an excuse to do what he's already been doing for the last 4 months, is what it is. So, yeah, there's so many moving parts to this one. And none of them are intelligent. I still don't think it's a good idea to accept this jet. I understand the why, and I understand the legal sides behind it. I still don't think it's a good idea. Arvolt! Let's, we've got some chat going on here. Vong says, this is a failure to understand how Mohammedan diplomacy works. First rule is such, thus follows. If you want to talk to a foreign leader whose military is more powerful than you, you arrive with gifts in hand, because if you don't, he'll behead you. Fair point. Decca says it's an administration, not an organization. Arvolt is here. I'm confused. I thought he liked Palestine and Qatar as a big supporter of Qatar. I'm sorry, I thought the left liked Palestine and Qatar as a big supporter of Qatar. I don't understand Arvolt's comment. But Arvolt gave a GM, so everybody give a GM back to Arvolt. GM, say it back. GM, say it back, friends. If you will. Alright, speaking of more in Qatar, in good news for U.S. jobs, Boeing inks record-breaking deal for Qatar Airways to buy up to 210 planes. Well, here's the thing is, I hope for Qatar's sake that Boeing has solved the issue of the doors flying off in midair as well. From Kevin Broynier. Boeing and Qatar Airways on Wednesday announced a deal for the Middle East airline to buy 210 jets, notching the U.S. planemaker's largest ever order of wide-body aircraft. And these are the big ones, too. These are the double-aisle ones. Not like the little thin strips of metal that I've ridden on in the air before from Southwest that only have like 6 seats in a row because there's only one aisle. These are the double aisle ones. These are the big boys. The order, the biggest in Qatar Airways history, includes 130 of Boeing's 787 Dreamliners and 30 of its much-delayed 777-9s with options for up to 50 more planes, the company said in a press release. Puget Sound is about to get rich. Qatar Airways also signed an agreement with GE Aerospace for more than 400 engines to power the Boeing planes, which I believe is Texas based. Let me look at that one. I can't answer that one confidently enough to say yes. So a lot of that is down the south and even into the Rust Belt, just on the Google AI overview, which I can't believe I even use at this point because I made the AI on Snapchat block me because I didn't want it to be there. GE Aerospace has numerous manufacturing locations across the U.S. and globally. Some notable U.S. locations include cities like Asheville, North Carolina, Auburn, Alabama, Lafayette, Indiana, Hooksett, New Hampshire, which I'm a little surprised. I didn't realize there was a lot of manufacturing in New England, and Evansdale, Ohio. So there's a lot of neighborhoods around here that will probably get some nice blowback from that. Some nice kickback from that, I should say, not blowback. Blowback is a bad thing. Kickback is a good thing. So, hey, look, there's American jobs right there, too. And then, of course, all the parts to manufacture, or not manufacture, but maintain these things after the fact. Warranty or otherwise. The purchase of wide-body aircraft engines is the largest in GE Aerospace's history, according to the release. Boeing and Qatar Airways struck the agreement during Trump's state visit to the Emir of Qatar, part of the president's 4-day tour of the Middle East. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg appeared alongside Trump at the Emiri Diwan in Doha for the signing ceremony. This is a critical next step for Qatar Airways on our path as we invest in the cleanest, youngest, and most efficient fleet in global aviation, Qatar Airways CEO Badr Mohammed Al Mir said in a statement. This is so we can meet the strong demand in the airline and we seamlessly connect the passengers to the world better than anyone. Boeing Commercial Airlines CEO Stephanie Pope said the record-breaking order with Qatar Airways solidifies their future fleet, with our market-leading wide-body airplane family at its center. The 426-seat twin-engine 777-9 is part of Boeing's 777X series, which is yet to produce any deliveries and has still not been certified by the FAA. Which, given the fact that this deal is going through, I believe, since the FAA is an executive branch, there's going to be a large Manhattan elbow into the side of the FAA chief saying, okay, we got to get this certified quickly. Make sure it's safe. Do it right, but do it quick. Or you're fired. The White House earlier Wednesday valued the plane deal at $96 billion, and it will support 154,000 U.S. jobs annually, and more than 1 million domestic jobs in total. Those are some big numbers. Boeing and Qatar Airways, however, said the deal will result in roughly 400,000 jobs in the U.S. Boeing's website says it currently employs around 170,000 people globally. It's the largest number of jets in the history of Boeing, Trump said after Ortberg signed the agreement in the Emiri Diwan. The deal could be a boom for Boeing, which has not posted a profit since 2018. Again, that's probably involved in the fact that their doors are blowing off in the middle of the year. Don't think I forgot about that. The plane maker has been beset by major safety concerns, manufacturing defects, cost overruns, and nearly a 2-month-long machinist strike last year. Its business dealings have been disrupted by Trump's trade war. China stopped accepting deliveries of Boeing planes to its airlines in response to the Trump tariffs, Ortberg said last month. But the company has recently narrowed its losses in its addresses to a backlog worth of more than $500 billion, Ortberg said in Boeing's first quarter earnings call. So, huge things going. Can I get a mod, please? Pitched camera agree. Needs a little bit of a timeout to think about what he or she said. No bans, just a little bit of a timeout. They usually self-ban. Alright, some of the concerns, of course, from the Associated Press. Trump's Middle East visit comes as his family deepens its business. Crypto ties in the region. Briefly, because we discussed this 3 articles ago. From Will Weissert. It's not just a gesture of the $400 million luxury plane that President Trump says he's smart to accept from Qatar, or that he effectively auctioned off the first destination on his major foreign trip, heading to Saudi Arabia because the kingdom was ready to make big investments in U.S. companies. It's not even that Trump family has a fast-growing business ties in the Middle East that run deep and offer potential of vast profits. Instead, it's the idea that the combination of these things and more, deals that show the close ties between a family whose patriarch oversees the U.S. government and a region whose leaders are fond of currying favor through money and lavish gifts, could cause the U.S. to show preferential treatment of Middle Eastern leaders when it comes to American affairs of state. Before Trump began his visit to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, his sons Eric and Don Jr. had already traveled to the Middle East extensively in recent weeks. They were drumming up business for the Trump Organization, which they are running in their father's stead while he is in the White House. Eric announced plans for an 80-story Trump Tower in Dubai, the UAE's largest city, which, for Dubai standards, is actually a small building. Uh-oh. My views just dropped off like crazy over on the main channels. I went from 10 to like 4 in a second. So let's check and see if we dropped anything off of here. Don't know. Let's keep going. It's just like, boom, gone. And I don't know what happened. I should open the treasure chest, even though I think Arvolt's the only one to claim it. Arvolt, you want some lemons? I'm not signed in. I can't do the treasure chest. On-air production, folks. Make sure you donate some of them back. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. There aren't that many, but we'll pop the treasure chest. Surprised that I had that much. I didn't use DLive for months and months and months on end. Probably over a year, I think. Alright, 80-story Trump Tower in Dubai. He also attended a recent crypto conference with Zach Witkoff, a founder for the Trump family crypto company World Financial Liberty, and son of Trump's Do Everything envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. We're proud to expand our presence in the region, Eric said last month in announcing Trump Tower Dubai was set to start construction this fall. The presidential visit to the region and his children's work as part of the in the same part of the world for the family's money-making opportunities, puts a spotlight on Trump's willingness to embrace foreign deal-making while in the White House, even in the face of growing concerns that doing so could tempt him to shape U.S. foreign policy in ways that benefit his family's bottom line. Nowhere is the potential overlap more prevalent than in the Middle East. The Trump family's business interests in the region include a new deal to build a luxury golf resort in Qatar, partnering with Qatari DR, a real estate company backed by that country's sovereign wealth fund. The family is also leasing its brand to 2 new real estate projects in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's capital, in partnership with Dar Global, a London-based luxury real estate developer and subsidiary of private Saudi real estate firm Al Arkan. The Trump Organization is similarly partnered with Dar Global on Trump Tower set to be built in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in an upcoming Trump International Hotel and luxury golf development in neighboring Oman. Oh man. I always think that whenever I see that name. During the crypto conference, a state-backed investment company in Abu Dhabi announced it had chosen USD, the world's Liberty Financial stablecoin, to back a $2 billion investment in Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange. Critics say that allows Trump family-aligned interests to essentially take a cut of each dollar invested. I don't know anything about it, Trump said when asked by reporters about the transaction on Wednesday. Then there's the Saudi government-backed LIV Gulf, which has forged close business relationships with the president and hosted tournaments at Trump's Doral Resort in South Florida. Given the extensive ties between LIV Gulf and the PIF, or between Trump enterprises more generally in the Gulf, I'd say there's a pretty glaring conflict of interest here, said Joan Hoffman, a research fellow in defense and foreign policy at the libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute. He was referring to Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which has invested heavily in everything from global sports giants to video game maker Nintendo, with the aim of diversifying the kingdom's economy beyond oil. Trump said he did not talk about LIV Gulf during his visit to Saudi Arabia. So, there are a lot of concerns for conflict of interest, and again, it's one of the things that came with having a businessman as the leader of the, quote, free world at this point, is the fact that, yes, we're not sitting here with people who have been in the government forever, who've been enriching themselves off of foreign wars, foreign diplomacy, and foreign policy for the last 50 years. We're dealing with somebody who could come out of office and enrich himself based on foreign wars, foreign policy. So, I think a lot of the people who are having concerns of this do need to go back and look inward. And I'm not saying any of it's right either, by the way. I think that there are very major concerns that we have to talk about. But again, this comes with the caveat that I don't like the people who have spent the last 50 years doing the same thing, using the government as their cash cow rather than private industry. Whereas a lot of the other people who are making a stink about this, like the people who have used the last 50 years to enrich themselves off of foreign policy. Skip this one. Looks like there's some cyber, I'm sorry, not some cyber, some nuclear talk going on here. I think it'd be hilarious, by the way, if this all came out with peace with Iran. I know little Benny Boy would be absolutely livid if that happened, though, too. Okay, Iran, okay. Largest state sponsor of terror, okay? And we need to cut ties with them. We need to go bomb them because they don't like Israel, okay, gang? We need to do something about this. Let's talk about bubble-headed bleach blonde for a moment, shall we? From the Daily Wire. Bleach blonde spars with reporters who suggest Trump could use Middle East for trip for personal profit. Mostly I want to watch the video off of this one, but to preface this, White House press secretary bubble-headed bleach blonde sparred with a reporter who suggested that Trump was personally profiting from his time as president, specifically his upcoming, at the time, trip to the Middle East, saying Trump has, in the past, that he was likely losing money while he held the office. During Friday's White House briefing, a reporter asked whether Trump, while visiting the Middle East, planned to meet with people associated with his family business ventures, in addition to political leaders, and Bleach Blonde quickly read between the lines of her questions. Let's listen.
you noted he is a successful businessman. Do you know if the president has any plans to meet with any of the folks involved with any of the family businesses over there, or see any of the sites that are going to be
Not to my knowledge, and let me just get to the premise of your question that both of you have raised. I think it's frankly ridiculous that anyone in this room would even suggest that President Trump is doing anything for his own benefit. He left a life of luxury and a life of running a very successful real estate empire for public service, not just once, but twice. And again, the American public reelected him back to this White House because they trust he acts in the best interests of our country and putting the American public first. This is a president who has actually lost money for being president of the United States. I don't remember these same type of questions being asked of my predecessor about a career politician who was clearly profiting off of this office. That is not what President Trump does, and this White House holds ourselves to the highest of ethical standards.
And I'm not always thrilled by the throwing of it back in there by a government official saying, oh, well, this would be okay if he was doing this even because Biden did this. Now, me as a guy sitting in what amounts to a spare bedroom in his house, raising these concerns, yes, that's a big thing. But, you know, your Hillarys, your Bidens, your Romneys, your people like that have been making money off of foreign policy in one way or another for a half a century. But to hear the press secretary come back out and do that does seem a little bit shaky. All right, we know about the 160 Boeing jets. Let's skip this one. We read that one already. What else do we have? 1.2 trillion economic commitment with Qatar, including significant Boeing order. So this one's going to talk a little bit about the other stuff that's going on that, but of course the Boeing order is the biggest one with it. Let's read from Fox Business. Turn off Fox. Even though I myself am going to read from Fox. White House announces $1.2 trillion in economic commitment with Qatar, including significant Boeing order from Eric Revel. The White House on Wednesday announced that he secured economic commitments worth at least $1.2 trillion from Qatar, including a historic deal for Boeing jetliners. Let's see. We got the 787s, 777s, 154,000 U.S. jobs annually. Several other private sector deals involving Qatar were referenced in the White House's announcement. It noted that McDermott has an active energy infrastructure deals worth $8.5 billion in Qatar, while Parsons won 30 projects worth up to $97 billion for its engineering services. Additionally, Quantinuum entered into a joint venture with Al Raban Capital to invest up to $1 billion in quantum technologies and workforce development in the U.S. The defense partnership between the U.S. and Qatar also stands to benefit from the deal-making push, with the White House saying the signings mark President Trump's intent to accelerate Qatar's defense investment in the U.S.-Qatar security partnership, enhancing regional deterrence and benefiting U.S. industrial base, which means, of course, making money off of Lockheed Martin, Halliburton, and Northrop Grumman. Again, surprise, surprise there. And Raytheon, an RTX business unit, landed $1 billion deal to provide Qatar with counter-drone capabilities, making the Gulf state the first overseas customers for Raytheon systems. Now, mind you, not the first time that Raytheon systems have been used in the Gulf state and foreign countries, but the first time a foreign country has bought from Raytheon. General Atomics reached a $2 billion agreement for Qatar to acquire the MQ-9B Reaper drones. The defense deals also included a statement of intent to potentially invest more than $38 billion to support burden sharing at Al Udeid Air Base, a major base for U.S. military in the region, along with other defense capabilities for air defense and maritime security. I'd be curious how that would go back and work, especially if a conflict were to be artificially manufactured. with Qatar after this particular president is out of office. And what would happen with the airbase, the personnel, and the alliance. The announcement of economic commitments with Qatar follows an announcement that Saudi Arabia would invest $600 billion in the U.S. So, a lot of this is all going to be tenuous, of course. It comes after Qatar's royal family offered the U.S. a Boeing 747-8 jumbo jet valued at $400 million to serve as a temporary Air Force One amid delays with Boeing's next-generation presidential aircraft, which is not expected to be delivered until 2029 at the earliest. Interesting timing for whoever follows the current president. So the current president wouldn't be able to use it. I'd be curious, by the way. This is another thing, and maybe this comes out as personal gain. I would be curious if getting this much business into Boeing's pocket after all this would actually lead Boeing to actually put the hurry up on the Air Force One aircraft. Because I'd be curious, especially with it being Washington based, if the CEO wasn't putting the hold on it because, Orange Man bad. Because she didn't want President Trump to get the new Air Force Ones and utilize them. I wonder if that would change anything. Curiouser and curiouser, I'd say. Skip that one. Trump's Middle East tour has more substance than the White House let on. From Stephen Collinson, this is an op-ed. There's more to Trump's Middle East trip than billion-dollar contracts, parades of camels, and a storm back home over Qatar's offer to give the president a new Air Force One. A tour narrowly billed by the White House as a chance for Trump to show he's a master dealmaker is jumbling the region's geopolitical jigsaw puzzle. Wherever he goes, Trump brings disruption that can forge possibilities, and he takes risks. For instance, his decision on his trip to lift sanctions on Syria to give a war-ravaged nation a second chance. But the move revives a perennial question about Trump's entire foreign and trade policy. Can he apply himself sufficiently to reach a genuine breakthrough from openings he creates? The White House's obsession with lionessing Trump means his most significant initiatives are often swamped with hype. See also Biden, see also Obama. Decca says, in follow-up to what I said, I wonder what the Boeing defense contract portfolio will look like next year. The DoD employees have a fair bit of work ahead. Well, and I mean, I don't have a lot of money to do so right now, but once we get back and pulling ahead, I'd like to put a little bit of money back into Boeing and Lockheed Martin as well. Right now. Because they look like good buys. This is not official financial advice. Do always consult with your financial advisor before making any decisions to your family. Somebody who knows your finances better than a person who's yelling into a microphone does. So a deal for Qatar to buy Boeing jets worth tens of billions of dollars got more attention back home Wednesday than its encounter in Riyadh with Syrian leader Ahmed al-Sharaa. The historic first meeting between U.S. and Syrian leaders in 25 years could be a signature initiative for Trump's tour. Before he overthrew the murderous dictator Bashar al-Assad, al-Sharaa was a rebel leader who pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda and had a $10 million U.S. bounty on his head. Yet Trump sat with him and lifted U.S. sanctions on his civil war-wracked country, hoping to give it a chance to unify and rescue civilians facing severe hunger. Trump's regional diplomatic ambitions are expanding. Trump's geopolitical shakeup doesn't end in Syria. He used the trip to build new pressure on Iran, to agree to restrictions on its nuclear program, warning of military action if it refuses, but clearly trying to head off the dire prospect of a new Middle East war. His journey has also highlighted growing daylight with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is seen as an ideological soulmate to the 47th president, but who is increasingly an object of Trump's frustration. Behind the scenes, Trump team has been talking with Qatari and Saudi officials about how to alleviate a humanitarian crisis in Gaza caused by Israel's blockade and an onslaught that has killed tens of thousands of citizens. Netanyahu's response has been to declare he had no choice but to keep fighting, and he targeted the Hamas leader who'd be needed for any peace talks in a strike in a hospital. There's no sense that the U.S. alliance with Israel is at risk, but gaps between Trump and Netanyahu have also opened over a U.S. pact to halt rocket attacks on Houthi rebels in Yemen. That did not include Israel. Trump's bypassing of the Israelis to deal this week to free the last living American hostage in Gaza, and on the Syria actions decision, Trump was not solely focused on the Middle East in recent days. He's also hoped to fly to Turkey for a startling photo op with Vladimir Putin of Russia and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine that would have validated his thus far unsuccessful attempt to end their war. Neither rival leader is likely to show up to Thursday's talks, prompting Trump to abandon his plans for an unexpected side trip and casting further doubt on his peace initiative. So, a lot of moving pieces over there. Hopefully, we can get some lasting peace in the Middle East. Something that I never thought that I would say in the 90s, of course, but possibly not in Eastern Europe. I want to talk just a bit about this one because they're talking about the pomp of all this, which, like Vaughn said earlier, it is involved and revolving around the fact that the region specifically puts a big incentive on the idea of having pomp and circumstance and lavish gifts. It is a Mohammedan philosophy in the area. Because I'd much rather the financial advisor yelled in my face. Absolutely. Fighter jets, chandeliers, a Cybertruck. See the pomp of Trump's Middle East visit. Leaders in Saudi Arabia and Qatar pulled out the stops this week for President Trump's multi-day tour to the Middle East, including decor, military displays, and yes, a Cybertruck. It is the first major foreign trip of Trump's second term, making a swing through the three wealthy Gulf nations of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, focusing on economic and investment deals in a region beset with geopolitical volatility. And as I said earlier, has been beset with geopolitical volatility for 5,000 years. White House Press Secretary Bubbleheaded Bleach Blonde said Trump is making the trip for commerce and cultural exchanges. Here's the gallery. Let's see, we've got a parade on the tarmac. We've got the U.S. flag on sailboats. Qatari fighter jets accompany Air Force One carrying President Trump en route to Doha. The Cybertruck. For reasons unknown. A Qatari police Cybertruck escorts the motorcade of Trump from Hamad International Airport towards the Royal Palace in Doha. On May 14th, 2025, Trump touched down at Hamad in Doha, with relations between the two governments in the spotlight over Qatar's offer to Trump of a $400 million luxury aircraft to serve as a new Air Force One and then pass it into his personal use. Yeah, just there's a ton of pomp. And like if you're listening on the audio platform, you're not seeing the pomp and circumstance that goes with this. I don't know much about Saudi Arabia in and of itself culturally, but I I'd be surprised, or I am surprised rather. Like, I see the regular military uniforms there, but then like all the people of circumstance have these white robes with the black tie around the head. So is that like the equivalent of wearing a suit in Saudi Arabia? I'm sure it's cooling at least, and I know it gets really warm over there. One of my friends, when we were younger, came up with a very, very dirty version of the graduation song that I promised to keep the language clean during the morning show because of commuters and kids in the car. So I will not sing it right now, but I can hear that in my head. Maybe I'll type it in the Discord later. So yeah, a lot of pomp and circumstance that went with that. We read about the ethical concerns. We'll skip that one. I think this is like the second to last one on this end. From Axios, Biden officials awed by Trump's rule-breaking Middle East moves, from Dave Lawler. I did read a little bit into this one, and I was a little bit amazed by just the news that was coming out of it. Trump's recent series of audacious foreign policy moves have astounded even some of his harshest critics. Just in the Middle East, and just in the past week, Trump has met with leader of the U.S. officially considers a terrorist, announced he'll lift all sanctions in Syria, and cut a truce with the Houthis, plus a hostage deal with Hamas, both of which excluded Israel. The Biden admin veterans who spoke with Axios raised questions about Trump's motivations, but grudgingly saluted his boldness. Gosh, I wish I could work for an admin that could move that quickly, one admitted. He does all this. It's kind of a science. It's met with a shrug, said Ned Price, a former senior State Department official under Biden. He has the ability to do things politically that previous presidents did not because he has complete unquestioned authority over the Republican caucus. I don't think it's that. That's the problem. And I know that, people like Ned Price are going to come and try to make this into the Trump cult, the MAGA cult, the this cult, the that cult, the this and the that, and the did and the da-da-da, and the day-to-day, and the DTD. And they're going to come and try to make this all about, it's they worship him, he's a cult leader, it's a religion and false prophet and all this other stuff. Here's the reality of why he's able to come back out and do this kind of stuff. And again, I'll cite Vong once again, the Mohammedan strategy that goes along with this, and the fact that they're giving him lavish gifts is the fact that with the Biden admin, and like with Hillary Clinton and John Kerry and Al Gore, and even to an extent Barack Obama, although he had a bit more of an understanding of how Asian politics worked. But all these guys, the Bushes, they're another good example, the Romneys of the world, people like that, they're used to a certain way of doing diplomacy. And when I say a certain way of doing diplomacy, I mean the fact that the way that they're used to doing it is in Western countries. They go to Paris and they say, "Ho ho ho ho! Oh, come on, we'll go do this in the background and shake my hand, and now we have a big military alliance, and I'll give you all these jets, and hey, let's have the snails and the lines and the ho 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 ho." In England, they'll go, "Oh, well, let's go to you and get a bit of gin, and we'll sit in the back room and we'll iron things out, and everything will be happy." Whereas, I mean, there is a tough guy approach, and these people in the Middle East have seen it. But you have to be willing to crack the hammer down, or at least make a show that you're going to crack the hammer down for leaders in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, to respect you, to want to come back and do business with you. It's disrespectful for them to come back and you just go back and shake their hand and say, let's go into the backroom deal and be peaceful and not do anything. Alright, furthermore, it's hard not to be simultaneously terrified at the thought of the damage he can cause with such power, and awed by his willingness to brazenly shatter so many harmful taboos, said Rob Malley, who held senior posts in 3 Democratic admins, including handling Iran talks under Presidents Obama and Biden. On issue after issue, Trump is taking steps no recent president would have even considered. He abandoned the unified Western position to back Ukraine as long as it takes by negotiating directly with Putin and declaring that Kiev will never get Crimea back and must cut a deal now. He inserted himself directly in the recent Kashmir crisis, something past admins have avoided, so as to not antagonize India. He endorsed direct talks with Iran and shrugged off hawks at home and abroad who tied the Obama and Biden admins in knots. It helps that many of them, like Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, are loath to cross Trump. On Syria, Trump's own State Department had espoused a policy similar to the Biden admins before it. Sanctions relief might be possible if militant-turned-statesman Ahmed al-Shara's government met a number of criteria, such as suppressing extremist groups. That meant that somewhat perversely, the new admin was being strangled by sanctions and imposed by the dictator they toppled, but it also was just the way that these things work, until Trump decided that it wasn't. It's so clearly a right decision, said Ben Rhodes, a national security aide to Obama, on Pod F the World podcast. I don't know why Biden didn't do this. I might have to go and listen to that one. I might not, because I can't stand the 2 people that run Pod F the World, but I might have to go back and listen to that one. That I'd be interested to hear Ben Rhodes and hear how those 2 morons try to twist it. I don't like Trump's motivations for a lot of the things he does, Rhodes continued, but one thing you will say is he's not tied to the constant fear of some bad faith right-wing attacks or some stupid blob type, we don't do this, we must leverage the sanctions for blah blah blah. No, sometimes you just have to try something different. Perhaps most shocking to veterans of previous admins, Trump authorized direct talks with Hamas last month that Israeli officials only learned about through espionage or by reading Axios. So, it's a different world. And hey, maybe we'll actually get some peace from it. I don't know. Speaking of India, let's talk about that one briefly, because that is cooled off. From NPC News, India disputes Trump's claim that trade incentives led to the India-Pakistan ceasefire. Yes, we're at a ceasefire in India and Pakistan, moving through Kashmir. From the Associated Press. The Indian government on Tuesday disputed Trump's claim that the U.S.-mediated ceasefire between India and Pakistan came about in part because he had offered a possible trade concession. Addressing a weekly news conference, Randhir Jaiswal, the spokesman for India's foreign ministry, said top leaders in New Delhi and Washington were in touch last week following the Indian military's intense standoff with Pakistan, but that there was no conversation on trade. The issue of trade didn't come up in any of these discussions, Jaiswal said, referring to the conversations held between Vice President Vance and PM Narendra Modi, as well as between Secretary of State Rubio and his Indian counterpart S. Jaishankar. Following Saturday's understanding between India and Pakistan to stop military action on land, in the air, and the sea, Trump told reporters Monday that he had offered to help both nations with trade if they agreed to de-escalate. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it now. If you stop it, we'll do a trade. And if you don't stop, we're not going to do any trade, Trump said. And all of a sudden, they said, I think we're going to stop. Trump said, crediting a leverage for influencing both the nation's decisions for a lot of reasons. But I think trade is a big one. Decca talking about the Trump cult worship from Ned Price says, that's fine if they come out and admit their worship of Marx and Rousseau. So, I mean, that's looking better and better. Which is good, because I'm not really thrilled with the idea of two nuclear powers that are right next to each other firing nuclear-tipped rockets back at each other. So good on that. Ah, the big one. They got people talking over here. The one that got the left to admit that they hate immigration. If it's coming from country, or it's coming with skin colors of people that they don't like. White South Africans arrive in the U.S. as refugees protected under Trump's carve-out. From Abigail Williams and Joy Y. Wang. American officials welcomed a group of 59 white South Africans at Washington Dulles Airport on Monday in a ceremony greeting them as refugees under the argument that they are fleeing discrimination and racially based violence in their home country. The newly arrived people are from an ethnic minority of Afrikaners, the group of whites who ruled South Africa during apartheid. The dozens that came Monday, including families of young children, arrived via flight chartered by the State Department. Their resettlement in the U.S. comes as the Trump admin has shut down refugee admissions from almost all of the countries, including Afghanistan, Sudan, Congo, and Myanmar. The Afrikaners were met on arrival by U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau and the Department of Homeland Security Deputy Secretary Troy Edgar. Landau said that Trump's pause of the U.S. refugee programs was from the very beginning subject to the exceptions when it was determined to be in the interest of the United States. He cited the example of when the refugees could be assimilated easily into our country. They tell quite harrowing stories of the violence they faced in South Africa that was not redressed by the authorities by the unjust application of the law, Landau said. The U.S., as we were proud to say, has stood for equal justice under the law and the fair and impartial application of the law. In an EO issued on February 7th, Trump said the U.S. would help with resettling Afrikaner refugees escaping government-sponsored race-based discrimination, including racially discriminatory property confiscation. He condemned what he called the country's shocking disregard of its citizens' rights, specifically stating the government had seized the agricultural property of white Afrikaners without compensating them. The EO also said the U.S. would no longer provide aid or assistance to South Africa. It came after the new South African land law went into effect. It seems to reflect the views of Elon Musk, the head of Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, who was born and raised in South Africa. Because, of course, NPC News was going to go that route. The law has been depicted by some whites in South Africa and some on the right in the U.S. as specifically targeting white farmers to take away their land. The South African government experts dispute this, noting the law allows for expropriation in cases when the land is not being used or there is a public interest in its redistribution, similar to eminent domain laws in the U.S. In February, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa pushed back on claims that it was a land grab. The recently adopted Expropriation Act is not a confiscation instrument, but a constitutionally mandated legal process that ensures public access to land in an equitable and just manner, as guided by the Constitution, he wrote on X days before the Trump issued his executive order. So, why is this important? Well, this has been a weird one. Definitely, because, as mentioned, this is one of the few times where the left is not going to come back up and run to the defense of refugee resettlement in the United States. Realistically, I do look at this and, well, number one, it does shoot a major hole in the idea of the F off we're full narrative that a lot of the MAGA right are coming off and talking about with this. It's interesting that we have a large amount of people from other southern nations who are facing what is said to be similar allegations of political violence, oftentimes in a larger number. And I would be curious to see how the South Africans can actually assimilate to the US culture. I met a girl from South Africa once, which is interesting because I actually thought that she was Scandinavian when I met her. She was au pair on a work visa in the Madison area, actually. Cool girl. But an interesting situation of when you reverse the race and everything, it turns everybody back and forth on their head. Now, me, I've always been for the legal process if they're doing it right. I don't care what country they come from. If it's under refugee status, as long as they do it in the proper way, then, I'm not as opposed to them coming over and doing these kinds of things and resettling to the U.S. They have specific reason, they go through the paperwork, we vet them, we do this kind of thing. I hear a lot of the MAGA right come back out and say that that's wrong because, we're importing the entire third world under this kind of thing. Now, unfortunately, these are the nations that are destabilized, as for the most part third world nations. South Africa is one of the few first world nations that comes out into this category. And it's a lot different from them going over to Canada and then waltzing over the border as well. So, if there's legit political persecution, and this isn't a very small number, then yes, let's do so. But let's also come back and look at some of these other countries where, based on what past administrations have done, there are major civil wars, political persecution as well going on here. So, I don't know what the right answer is on this one. I still find it funny no matter what. From ABC, Trump admin faces criticism for prioritizing white South African refugees. From Sharon Kingston, Trump admin's move to prioritize the resettlement of white South African refugees in the U.S., even as it has turned away refugees from countries including Afghanistan and Haiti, has sparked allegations of hypocrisy and double standards, as well as questions about who's footing the bill for the new arrivals. Something, again, I never thought that I'd hear a leftoid say. Well, we just have to get these new arrivals in here. Right-winger, who's footing the bill? You're a racist because you don't want to bring them in here. Now it's, let's get these people in here because they're politically persecuted. Leftoids, who's footing the bill? Hey, look, there's no calls of racism from that one. Alright, let's look at the criticism because we've read what's happening with this already. The International Organization for Migration told ABC News it was not involved in administering loans for any of the 59 people who arrived at Dulles this week, and the Trump admin has repeatedly declined to say whether they paid their own way. Let's see. Nothing really on criticism here, looks like. There we go. Some groups in the U.S. that frequently work with the government to resettle refugees have also pushed back on the Trump admin's prioritization of Afrikaners, with at least one, the Episcopal Migration Ministries, saying it won't play a part in resettling them. In light of our church's steadfast commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and our historic ties with the Anglican Church of South Africa, we are not able to take this step, Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe said in a statement. So, yeah, they're doing it for race-based purposes, of course. It's funny, they say faces criticism, but the only criticism that they talk about is the one from the Episcopal Migration Ministry, and they're saying that it's based on race only. We want the brown people first before the white people. South Africa is disputing claims. We talked about that in 2 articles ago. No, we're not actually targeting these people. Trump is actually set to go meet with the South African president. This one comes from our friends over at NPR. Kate Bartlett reporting Trump to meet South African president amid deteriorating relations. Of course, NPR is going to tell you that Trump man is bad for bringing white people in from South Africa away from the whims of their brown president. So hit that donate button, because otherwise NPR cannot tell you how evil and racist this all is. NPR's ever-printing reality, National Progressive Radio. Let's see what it is that they have to say. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will travel to Washington next week to meet Trump in the White House on Wednesday to discuss bilateral, regional, and global issues of interest, his office has announced. The visit comes as relations between the U.S. and South Africa are at their lowest since the end of apartheid. Trump has repeatedly claimed that terrible things are happening in South Africa and invited Afrikaners to apply for refugee status in the U.S. On Monday, the first group of 59 white South Africans who had been approved arrived in D.C. on a U.S. government-chartered plane. So, the other article said that we didn't know who was footing the bill. According to this, it is going to be the U.S. The statement from Ramaphosa's office said that next week's visit provides a platform to reset the strategic relations between the two countries. Oh, fanning has taken off. That means that I talked for too long. Although I did want to start 2 hours before I did, so. In February, Trump cut all aid to South Africa, a longtime ally of the U.S. in an EO. The order cited the fact that South African government, a firm supporter of Palestinians, accused Israel of genocide for its war against Hamas and Gaza, filing a suit in the International Court of Justice in The Hague. He also alleged without evidence. I love it when these left-wing outlets put that in there. Without evidence that the White House South Africans of Dutch descent, known as Afrikaners, were being persecuted because of their race. Refugee nonprofits, noting the Trump admins, gave the group that arrived on Monday the extraordinary reception not usually given to refugees, with high-ranking State Department officials turning out to welcome them. The Afrikaners, including children, were given small American flags to wave and told by the Deputy Secretary of State, Chris Landau, "That's such an honor to have you here." Landau drew parallels with the Afrikaners' arrival in the land of the free to his own family's experiences fleeing Nazi Germany. The spectacle left many South Africans watching at home incredulous and saw Ramaphosa make his strongest remarks on the matter yet. He said in a group of Afrikaners were cowards because they just didn't want to live in the new South Africa, which has a black majority rule. He said many longed for the old days of apartheid. You know, that reminds me a lot of other memes that go around and other conversations that are had. Because you hear it all the time. You really do. Even coming over in here, if a person puts out on social media or says out loud that I want to go live out in the country or live in a rural area, the accusation, of course, is that it's code for, I want to get away from black people. So, of course, if there actually is a persecution and I've heard stories out of South Africa. I've never seen it. And of course, the mainstream news isn't going to report on it. But if true, then yes, these people have a legitimate grievance and a legitimate reason to get over here. But, when they come back over and actually try to escape it, the argument is they just want apartheid back. They want to be racist against black people. That's why they're coming over here. It's tiring. It really is. Just a brief one from the Daily Wire, and this is one that we can't do much over because it's behind mostly the paywall, but it's from Ben Shapiro. The left freaks out as Trump accepts white refugees. From Ben Shapiro. Every day, a new stupid controversy is pushed by the left. Now it's the fact that Trump admin has decided to grant some white South Africans refugee status. Why? Because the government in South Africa discriminates against white South Africans. The New York Times reported dozens of white South Africans arrived in the U.S. on Monday on charter jets after being granted refugee status by the Trump admin, which has made it virtually impossible for any other refugees to seek safe haven in America. The Times continues. The arrival represents a drastic reversal in U.S. refugee policies, which have long focused on helping people fleeing war, famine, and genocide. The South Africans may have been discriminated against, denied job opportunities, and been subject to violence because of their race, though the specifics of their cases are unclear. President Trump referring to the spate of murders and farmers in South Africa, and farmers are being killed. People who own land in South Africa are disproportionately white compared to the surrounding population, and it means that many of the farmers who are being killed are white. And of course, they're going to come back out and freak out over this because, well, it's white people. Alright, we've had some major breakthroughs in China. We talked a bit about this earlier in the finance portion of the show. We'll grab a little bit of this over here. US and China reach a deal to slash sky-high tariffs for now, with a 90-day pause. The US and China agreed Monday to slash the massive recent tariffs, restarting stalled trade between the two biggest economies and setting off a rally in global financial markets. But the de-escalation in Trump's trade wars did nothing to resolve underlying differences between Beijing and Washington. The deal lasts 90 days, creating time for the US and Chinese negotiators to reach a more substantive agreement. But the pause also leaves tariffs higher than before Trump started ramping them up last month. And businesses and investors must contend with uncertainty about whether the truce will last. U.S. Trade Rep Jamieson Greer said the U.S. agreed to drop the 145% tax Trump imposed last month to 30%. China agreed to lower its tariff rate on U.S. goods to 10% from 125%. I get that China's the underdog in this one, but I would still come back out and have said, oh hey, if you want to put 30 on us, then we'll put 30 on you. Reciprocal. The same. But China's tariffs were always below the US's anyway. Greer and the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the tariff reductions at a news conference in Geneva. The officials struck a positive tone as they said the two sides had set up consultations to continue discussing their trade issues. Bessent said that triple-digit tariffs the two countries imposed on each other last month in an escalation of tensions Trump started amounted to the equivalent of an embargo, and neither side wants that. We do want trade. Because, of course, we're going to turn around and send all of our factories and all of our jobs over to get done by cheap Chinese labor. The delegations, escorted around town and guarded by scores of Swiss police, met for at least a dozen hours on both days of the weekend at a sun-baked 18th century villa that serves as the official residence of the Swiss ambassador to the UN in Geneva. At times, the delegation leaders broke away from their staffs and settled into sofas on the villa's patios overlooking Lake Geneva, not the one in Wisconsin, by the way, helping to deepen personal ties in the effort to reach a much-sought deal. A 30% levy that Americans are now imposing on Chinese goods includes an existing 20% tariff intended to pressure China into doing more to prevent the synthetic opioid fentanyl from entering the U.S. It also includes the same 10% baseline tariff Trump slapped on imports from most of the world's countries. The 30% tax comes at the top of other levies on China, including some left over from Trump's first term and kept by former President Joe Biden. But they were fine when he did it. Trump had ratcheted the combined tariff to 145% last month, furious that China was retaliating before backing down on Monday. China's Commerce Ministry called the agreement an important step for the resolution of the two countries' differences and said it lays the foundation for further cooperation. The initiative aligns with the expectations of producers and consumers in both countries and serves the interests of both nations as well as the common interests of the world, a ministry statement said. China hopes the U.S. will stop erroneous practice of unilateral tariff hikes and work with China to safeguard the development of economic and trade relations, injecting more certainty and stability into the global economy, the ministry said. The joint statement by the two countries said China also agreed to suspend or remove other measures it has taken since April 2nd in response to the U.S. tariffs. China has increased export controls on rare earths, including some critical to the defense industry, and added more American companies to the export controls and unreliable entity lists, restricting their business with and in China. So, our friends on the left are, of course, coming out and saying, well, Trump blinked and there aren't going to be any new factories in here. This is the nuanced channel. These are things that we do have to consider when we come with this. Now, it is unsustainable to cut a large amount of the small product manufacturing and the small product marketplace out of the U.S. market. The cheap crap that I mentioned before that you get at Walmart. It's 100% unsustainable to keep that pace up. And I know and I understand that. Very much so, in fact. But with that being said, you can't just cut it out of the American economy if you want the factories built over in this country. And I've been bringing this up since the beginning of the major tariff wars. You have to have a plan in place to build the factories to build the stuff. And as our boomer parents taught us before, if it's done right, there can be, it's not a really rewarding career, but it's a sustainable career in manufacture in the United States. You used to be able to do it on a one-income family with one member working at the factory day in and day out, putting lids on jars or something like that. You can go back and buy a 17-bedroom house and have 18 kids. That's an exaggeration, of course. On one factory worker's income. But right now the infrastructure is not in place to go back and start doing this. I've brought this up before. A lot of the factories now in the U.S. have been converted into office buildings and apartment buildings. They're sitting vacant and dormant right now. The tooling has been taken out of them. The tooling has been sold off, sometimes to China, to go get the stuff remade. So there's no ability to go in and get started. You can go get manufacturers started on making the machinery, which of course involves other manufacturers coming out and making the machinery and getting things started and going, but it takes time. Meanwhile, you have a major supply chain crash in your own economy. And people losing their jobs left and right over it. Or their ability to get the stuff, because realistically, our economy was left in shambles under the Biden administration. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, in things I like and things that I hate. Where we were promised that we had such a great economy, but the people on the ground didn't experience the great economy. So, I think the 145% tariff needed to be there to remind people that it's possible to go back and do. So maybe they have an incentive to go back and do stuff. I honestly wish he would have held on to it a little bit longer. Because one of the hard parts is, yes, it sucks for the economy, it sucks for the American people, but there's no incentive to go back and try to do something about it if you turn around and you change it back. From CNN, a massive Trump tariff still exists on some of China's cheapest exports. From Ramisha Maroof. Shoppers got little relief this week from a giant tariff on previously cheap duty-free goods from China, but the tariffs that do remain are still poised to derail the shopping habits of millions of Americans who shop at ultra-low-priced e-commerce sites like Shein and Temu. The Trump administration has cut its tariff on the de minimis packages or shipments of goods worth $800 or less, coming in from China from 120 to 54% and slashed the rate from 154% to 30% for packaged from commercial carriers. A $100 flat fee option is also surged to $200 per postal item come June 1st, as was previously planned according to the executive order issued Monday, and which goes into effect after midnight on Wednesday. The change is emblematic of the state of the U.S.-China trade war. The relationship is improving, but still has further to go before it's back to pre-January levels on Wednesday. China rolled back its overall tariffs on U.S. goods to 10% for 90 days, while the U.S. levies on the vast majority of Chinese products have gone down to 30% for that period. The U.S. tariffs come on top of levies that were already in place before President Trump began his second term. So, I mean, it is interesting, too, like Shein and Temu, which, no doubt, those places are coming in probably subject to a bigger tariff because they're bypassing American retailers, which are otherwise getting cheap Chinese crap, by offering the ability to sell cheap Chinese crap directly to people as long as you can wait for the ship to get back over here. I can understand that. I really can. It's something I've never used, of course. Like, I remember the ads for Wish not that long ago. Before, I think, did Temu buy them out, or did they just go under? Or, I don't know what the story is with Wish, but Temu is the same kind of thing. It's cheap knockoff stuff that you can get for pennies on the dollar coming back over from China as long as you can wait 7 to 10 weeks for it. And I'm not 100% sure why people buy from those to begin with, except for the fact that they're really, really cheap. So, let's keep going here. Let's talk about the detention facilities. ICE head recognizes Congress's role in visiting detention facilities even unannounced. From Rebecca Santana. The head of the Department of Homeland Security's Immigration Enforcement Agency on Wednesday recognized the right of members of Congress to visit detention facilities even unannounced, while the department's secretary said members of Congress should have requested a tour of the immigration detention facility in New Jersey, where a skirmish broke out last week. The slightly divergent comments by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and Todd Lyons, the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, came in separate congressional committee hearings on Wednesday. Long story short, a bunch of members of Congress tried to get into a ICE facility and battled with members of the ICE facility in doing so. 3 members of Congress have said they went to the facility to inspect it as a matter of congressional oversight, and that federal agents escalated the situation by arresting the mayor of Newark, who was also trying to enter. DHS has blamed the lawmakers, accusing them of trying to break into the detention center. Noem dove straight into the brewing controversy during her opening statement. What happened on May 9th was not an oversight. It was a political stunt, she said. DHS later followed up on Noem's remarks with a news release, once again accusing the representatives of storming the facility and reminding members of Congress of the visitation rules. Lyons addressed the issue well after being questioned by Lauren Underwood, a Democrat from Illinois. We acknowledge that any member of Congress has the right to show up for an inspection of one of our facilities and their oversight capability, Lyons said. He also said that while those visits are unannounced, members need to show identification and go through the screening and can't bring contraband. By law, members of Congress are allowed to visit ICE facilities and don't have to give any notice, although congressional staff members need to give up to 24 hours notice. So, yeah, the staffer needs to give 24 hours notice. The congressman does not. Federal prosecutors charged Newark Mayor Ross Baraka with trespassing after agents arrested him outside the fence of the Delaney Hall Detention Center on Friday. The interim U.S. Attorney for New Jersey says Baraka, a Democrat who is running for governor, ignored warnings to leave while he was at the 1,000-bed ICE facility with 3 members of New Jersey's congressional delegation. You can tell I'm over 2 hours. I'm starting to get really mush-mouthed on this one. The arrest escalated into a brief but tense confrontation in the parking lot that included members of Congress and federal agents, some of whom wore masks. The representatives, Reps LaMonica McIver, Bonnie Watson Coleman, and Robert Menendez Jr., said they have went to the facility to inspect it as a matter of congressional oversight. We were able to get in, speak to detainees, check out the facilities, and make sure that everything was okay, Watson Coleman told CNN in an interview Sunday that also included her New Jersey colleagues. We were almost 2 hours before the confrontation took place, but ICE kept giving us the runaround and kept saying they needed to talk to somebody else. You know, kind of like Hannah Dugan said about ICE coming in and picking up somebody out of her courtroom. I wonder where they learned that from, actually. Watson Coleman spokesperson Ned Cooper said that the 3 lawmakers went there unannounced because they plan to inspect the site, not take a scheduled tour. DHS and ICE are integral to President Trump's goal of carrying out mass deportations. Lyons defended ICE's performance, saying that agents were finally able to do the job they signed up for. He said the agency is focusing on the worst of the worst, and Homeland Security totes daily the arrests that they made of people convicted of crimes in the U.S. or alleged gang members, but critics dispute, saying the agency is sweeping up people who pose no threat to push the increase deportations. But can you show that? Can you show evidence of the fact that they're doing that? And I don't think that they can. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, but we do need to have some evidence of the fact that they're actually doing it, not just a wild accusation. Lyons said there have been 9 deaths in custody, and the agency investigates all of them. Republicans are planning to pour billions of dollars into immigration enforcement, with more money for deportation officers, detention spaces, and removal flights, rather. The plan aims to remove 1 million illegal immigrants annually and house 100,000 people in detention centers. It calls for 10,000 more immigration and customs enforcement officers and investigators. ICE houses people at arrest at a network of detention centers around the country, including government-run facilities, privately contracted facilities, and local jails. So, the big skirmish, of course, is yes. They got in, they started investigating, and a fight started. Which had to be at least a little bit funny given the average age of Congress. Skip that one because the Associated Press did a good job of covering it. From the Hill, though, temperatures rise over House Democrats scuffle with ICE agents. From Julia Mueller and Rebecca Beach. Temperatures are rising over an altercation between 3 Democratic lawmakers and immigration agents at a detention center in New Jersey. As Democrats say, the admin is using the incident to improperly target political opposition. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem this week accused Garden State Reps Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Bob Menendez, and LaMonica McIver of committing felonies during the Friday scuffle with law enforcement at the Delaney Hall Detention Center, and called for the House Democrats to be removed from their committees or censured, drawing sharp backlash from the left as members of Congress are permitted to make unannounced visits to facilities. We'll talk about the removal of committee assignments separately, but realistically, the door has been open for that for a while. Democrats have accused DHS of lying about what happened, and after a DHS spokesperson suggested they could face charges, AOC warned Trump admin officials that we're going to have a problem if arrests transpire. Hakeem Jeffries cautioned arrests would constitute a red line. Meanwhile, Buddy Carter has floated stripping the 3 Democrats of their committee assignments, arguing their behavior constitutes an assault on immigration and customs enforcement. On Tuesday, William Timmons introduces a resolution to censor McIver over what he called a reckless stunt. Speaker Johnson of Louisiana didn't endorse any proposal he called the Friday incident a new low for congressional Democrats, and said House Republicans are weighing the next steps in order to address the wildly inappropriate behavior. Now, if we talk about and look a little bit closer at what happened with this and the stripping of committee assignments, now, there doesn't need to be any sort of reason to strip somebody of committee assignments. You basically just have to not like them. You can even start conversations of expulsion of Congress without any sort of oversight whatsoever. Again, it's just a vote on the people on whether or not you actually like this person. See Marjorie Taylor Greene and George Santos. I was about to say Rob Santos. I'm like, no, that's not right. No, it's George Santos. Which George Santos ultimately got convicted for what he did, and I don't know if I agree with that or not. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a Democrat plant through and through, was removed from her committee assignments for something that happened on the campaign trail and not while she was in office. So the door is wide open for this, to do so without any sort of oversight. I would rather, again, come back and see an investigation and some sort of conviction before you come back out and remove from committee assignments, because, and again, in the case of Marjorie Taylor Greene, even though I don't care for her, I can't vote for her, so anything that happens to her is between her and the people of Rome, Georgia. And the fact that they have no representation at that point, I do see as a problem. But I didn't make the rules and I didn't set the precedent either, so it's there. Because people didn't like a certain member of Congress. Lost my cursor again. There it is. So one of the hard parts of doing 3 screen is sometimes you lose that. DHS is saying that more arrests are on the table, which, again, the question comes as, for what? They have explicit permission to do all this. And there is an official resolution to strip the Democrats in the ICE facility. Libs of TikTok put out the AOC video, by the way. And again, one of the things that I hate the most about all this is the, can you imagine if if it went the other way, if the shoe was on the other foot? But she's going to try to be Alex from the block here. Let's listen.
And now what DHS is trying to say, again, they're using public intimidation because they know that they cannot come for us all. They know that they cannot come for us all. And recently what they said is that DHS is allegedly looking into arresting members of Congress who were showing up for their legal and constitutional obligation to conduct oversight. If anyone's breaking the law in this situation, It's not members of Congress, it's the Department of Homeland Security. It's people like Tom Homan and Secretary Kristi Noem. You lay a finger on someone, on Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman, on or any of the representatives that were there, you lay a finger on them, we are going to have a problem. Because the people who are breaking the law are the people who are not abiding by it. And it is enshrined in the law that members of Congress who show up to ICE and CBP facilities are required to be granted access, legally required to be granted access. And they legally cannot be inhibited from accessing these facilities to conduct their constitutional obligation to investigate and conduct oversight. So if Kristi Noem wants to break the law, that's on her. But it sure as hell is not someone like Representative Robert Menendez that needs to be
Oh, she said hell.
Okay?
She's serious. She said hell. Oh my God. Look, listen to how serious she is. Speaking of immigration, Hannah Dugan has been indicted at this point. Now, she's trying to say that she has judicial immunity. I don't think that's the case either. NPC News reporting federal grand jury indicts Milwaukee judge accused of obstructing immigration agents. From Raquel Coronel Uribe. A reminder on this one, of course, and I say this anytime we say indictment off of this. Credibly indicted, credibly accused. All the stuff that doesn't involve a conviction at this point. This is an indictment. This is a grand jury. This is the prosecution presenting evidence to a federal jury that the defense doesn't get to present any counter evidence to see if there's enough evidence here to make the case that the defendant can defend from. You can indict a ham sandwich. This is nothing that we didn't already expect, given the fact that this woman got arrested already. A federal grand jury on Tuesday indicted a Wisconsin judge arrested by the FBI for allegedly obstructing the government agents seeking to detain an undocumented immigrant. The two-page indictment, so here are the charges, accuses Hannah Dugan of confronting members of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and falsely telling them they need judicial warrant to conduct their operation. It also accused her of directing the undocumented immigrant and his lawyer to exit through a separate door to sidestep federal agents. So they don't give me the actual full legal charge. And they don't show the federal indictment, unfortunately. The maximum penalty for the counts is a total of 6 years and up to $350,000 in fines. Dugan is scheduled to enter a plea to the charges on Thursday morning. Which, of course, is going to be not guilty because she believes that she has some sort of immunity from any sort of prosecution as a judge, which is not the case. I mean, being this close to Illinois, you should already know that, given how many judges have gone to jail in Illinois. This woman is not going to see the inside of a jail cell. I can tell you that with a fair amount of certainty. First-time offender, no criminal record, white-collar crime, and the means to mount a decent defense. Is going to plead down, if there's a conviction at all, to a misdemeanor and a fine. They might push this just to get the optics of the courtroom. But yeah, there's no way this woman even sees the inside of a jail cell. And if, for whatever reason she does, it'll be under a year in a resort-style minimum security. The white-collar prison. She's not going to turn into Orange is the New Black. The taxpayer bills. Average earners' tax bills would fall under House tax packages, forecasters would say. Which means they would get smaller refunds, even though they'd get more back throughout the year. But they'd say that their taxes went up because they get smaller refunds. From Brian Failer, average income people would see a double-digit percentage declines in their tax bills under House Republicans' tax package, according to a new official analysis that's sure to inflame partisan fights over who would get what under the plan. Now, of course, remember that your average family is getting any sort of tax cut is still tax cuts for the rich. Those making between 30 grand and 80 grand would pay around 15% less in taxes in 27. The report by the Nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation shows people making more than $1 million would see an 8.6% decline. See? There you go. Tax cuts for the rich. Tax cuts for their rich buddies. 30 grand, that's their rich buddies right there. However, the analysis did not take account of a likely expansion of deduction for state and local taxes, which would overwhelmingly benefit upper income households, or look at the possible effect of spending cuts Republicans are also planning that would primarily hit lower income people. Forecasters dropped the analysis on lawmakers. They jousted over the winners and losers under the plan that frequently contentious meeting of tax writing, Ways and Means Committee. Democrats called the plan a giveaway to billionaires, because they always say that. Frequently invoking Tesla founder Elon Musk. That's just in their script. Republicans scoffed plenty of provisions in their plan that would expand the child tax credit and standard deduction while creating a new break for tips, overtime pay, seniors, and car loan interest. Do you think billionaires are financing their cars? Aaron Bean of Florida said. Actually, they usually are, because they can get different tax benefits for that. So, do you think Elon Musk is working for tips? Gwen Moore of Wisconsin noted that many of the tax breaks are slated to expire at the end of 28, while provisions like one easing the estate tax would be made permanent. It's a trick, said Moore. You do it temporarily so you can get enough through the 2026 election. And then these benefits for children and elders and workers disappear, while the tax benefits for the ultra-wealthy soar. So, the fact that it's not supposed to take effect until 2027 means that you put it in place to get you through 2026. Milwaukee is not sending their finest. Democrats also emphasized the total dollar tax cut going to different income groups, rather than the percentage declines in their tax bills. People making more than $500,000 would see an aggregate tax cut of about $170 billion in 27. The report shows, compared to the $59 billion for those earning between 30 grand and 80 grand. Now, mind you, the people making over $500,000 pay way more in taxes, so they get a bigger cut. But go on. It's crazy the knots that people will twist themselves in order to say tax cut for the rich, and mostly benefiting the rich. Let's do a couple more here. I do actually have to take off here in just a bit, because there is some other stuff that's scheduled. But I wanted to touch on this one especially, because this is one of the things that's going to push this and make this one difficult. The tax deduction cap threatens to derail Trump's big, beautiful bill. From Daniel Chayton. Republicans in the GOP-led House are struggling to reach an agreement for the state and local tax deduction cap being considered for Trump's one big, beautiful bill. In the 389-page tax package released Monday, there was a provision to increase the SALT deduction cap to 30 grand for individuals earning $400,000 or less, up from the current 10 grand limit from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that's set to expire at the end of this year. The Ways and Means Committee advanced the tax measures in a 26-19 vote along party lines on Wednesday, but Republicans from high-tax blue states, such as New York, New Jersey, and California, are fighting for a higher ceiling. Another Ways and Means chairman Jason Smith posted on X a photo of Trump at the McDonald's saying, "Thanks for playing, Ways and Means Committee." Mike Lawler replied, "You forgot to add salt with those fries, Chairman." GOP lawmakers who want a salt deduction cap increase have star power in Elise Stefanik of New York, who's considering a run for governor after Trump pulled her nomination to become U.S. ambassador to the UN. She joined other New York Republicans for a May 8th statement that warned that a flat $30,000 salt deduction cap would not get their support. And I understand why they're coming back and fighting for this, and I get it based on the fact that their states are so highly taxed that this actually is a giveaway for more wealthy in their state, hoping to curry favor to bring in a better chance of being elected to governor or continuing to hold on to their seats. And I don't think there should be a cap on it either, by the way. I tend to agree with Stefanik based on the fact, and like me, I'm never going to make it to the salt cap unless I get a major windfall and get a much, much bigger house. I'm not going to see anywhere near what the cap is at that point, $30,000. But what I do know on that is the fact that a lot of the wealthier and even some of the middle class in New York City are going to see something like that. I know at least one person who's been in the chat today who probably is going to get close to that at some point. Just because of the way that taxes are formed. So, or taxes are levied rather, in that state. So, I think it would be a good start, and I do think Stefanik should get on board with it. I understand again that it disproportionately affects Republicans in New York and California, but regardless, it's still a windfall for the majority of the state, and it's not worth derailing the entire bill over that provision that we can come back and dicker over in a year or something. Alright. I unfortunately, at 11:41, I gotta get out of here. But we're gonna finish up. We're gonna do some things that I like and some things that I hate, because, I mean, to me, that's one of the more important parts of this program. So we'll call it here on the taxes. We'll move forward on this. Before we do things I like, things I hate, of course, we will do the rules of acquisition. The Ferengi rules of acquisition, as I always say when we explain this, come from Star Trek Deep Space Nine officially, but they were also used in other series. They basically are the Ferengi commandments for their religion, which involves how they conduct and do business with other species around the galaxy and internally with themselves as well. If you follow these rules of acquisition and you are Ferengi, you stand the chance to go to the Divine Treasury at the end of your life with social credit that goes along with this. And I gotta stop the Instagram feed and plug the phone in. So let's stop that now. You have the opportunity to go to the Divine Treasury at the end of life and bid on a better life. We look at each one of these. With Roddenberry being an avowed communist, we do look at and understand that some of these are mockeries of capitalism, but most of these can be used by us in the real world. So we look at what we can and cannot use in the real world and how it's used in canon, if I understand canon. Now, the 99th rule of acquisition is one that I can't really see how it's used in canon because it's from a reference book that I've not read, but it's also one that's a bit more of the mocking side of capitalism on this one here. The 99th rule of acquisition: trust is the biggest liability of all. Now, there is some truth to that, although given the fact that it's Roddenberry, I think it was intended to be a mockery, but I do understand that as well, because maintaining trust is one of the harder things that a person can do anywhere in business. Trust is the biggest liability of all, and it's one of the easiest things to lose, and of course, once it's lost, your business opportunities go away as well. So it's one to keep in mind, and I know sometimes it's advocated to stretch the truth a little bit in salesmanship. You use a salesman's truth instead of a full-out 100% honest-to-God truth. But you still have to make sure that you've told enough of a truth that you maintain the trust. Because once that trust is gone, your ability to do business also goes away. So trust can be the biggest liability of all. Alright, let's do a few things that I hate, and we'll do some things that I like to finish off. Alright, things that I hate today. The Derek Chauvin thing is coming back again. Now, I've already been in one argument on X over this one this morning, and here's the reality. The more that we're at each other's throats, the more that our neocon friends can come back in and promise that they're going to take care of us from the evil others. And of course, the more that Democrats can come back and say that they can protect the other people from people like, well, what most people consider me. Even though I myself am not a Republican, the idea is that Republicans want to put everybody in jail who disagrees with them. And that Democrats want to release mobs of people to destroy property into the world. So vote for us and we'll protect you from the evil other. And I think this was a neocon driven thing to try to curry favor, to hold on to the MAGA people when the neocons come back out and take over. Now, realistically, I do not believe that Derek Chauvin should be in prison for murder, but a pardon of him at this time politically would cause more problems than it would solve. So, and Tim Walz apparently fed the rumor mill about this as well. David Proper, Minnesota Governor Walz, and other Democrat leaders are fanning the flames of speculation that Trump is planning to pardon Chauvin, despite the president previously saying he hadn't heard of efforts to grant a reprieve. Sources close to the DOJ told the Post on Wednesday they had also heard nothing about a Chauvin pardon. That didn't stop Walz and Kamala's 24 running mate from weighing in on the online rumors. And again, this is just stupidity at this point. You come out and you do this in the midst of Trump's terms, you get out the riots, and now we've inflamed each other even more. What really needs to be done, and again, I do agree that Chauvin should not be in prison right now. I don't think that he should be. But actually get out the new evidence that's been able to be released, the ability to do so, and get a retrial off of this so we can see everything that's off of this. Now, that's not going to stop the riots, obviously, but I think they would be smaller if there's actually a point to doing this and we see the conviction overturned because of evidence rather than just a pardon that says, okay, we still believe that you did it, but hey, get off scot-free because white supremacy, which is what I think a pardon would do. Retry the case, do it again, and show the people what you want them to see. More things that I hate. People are trying to get Mike Johnson kicked out of office, but my question on this, of course, is Mike Johnson is a terrible leader. He's a terrible Republican leader. But who else are you going to put in his place? Now, these people think that if they vacate the chair, then they're going to get like a Matt Gaetz to go back and sit in his place, and I don't think that's a possibility either, because you're not going to have enough neocons to get him over the finish line for something like this. So, who? I want to hear names. If you're going to go back and vacate the chair, give me names. Give me names and give me a strategy to get that person across the finish line to do so. Because I don't think you have that plan in place. I think that you're just mad at this point. Other things that I hate are car seats making it harder to have more kids, and online debate reignites. Briefly from the Daily Wire, and this is an old one too, because I mean car seats they themselves are getting bigger and bulkier as they go, but it's harder in any passenger vehicle at this point to fill the thing up with kids. I mean, the average now is 1.8 kids because there's really no more room for any of that at this point. Why is this continuing to kick out on me? And I hate the fact that we're even having this debate because, I mean, I hate to sound old when I say this, but back in my day, I mean, you could put 7, 8 kids, small kids, without car seats in a rear-facing back of a station wagon that was bigger than any minivan on the market at this point. and be completely fine with it. I find this 100% believable. Another person wrote, we have 2 toddlers. Our 3rd child is on the way. Federal regulations mean that we are required to buy a bigger car than our CRV. If we want to... Gee, what is going on with the unresponsive page? Good God. To legally ride together in the same car, I have zero idea how that's supposed to work if you're a working class parent. We just had to buy a bigger vehicle to accommodate number 5, who will be here in October, another commentator echoed. We had a Grand Caravan and wasn't able to fit 4 in properly because of the rear bench seat belts and anchors. We just did the best that we could. We meant not using the seats as per the manual. And then, of course, if you do that, then you'll turn around and get fined for child endangerment. So, yeah, we do need to go back and revisit federal regulations and hopefully find a way to streamline car seats if you want to have people pumping out more kids. See, other things that I hate. Newsom is going to make another run for this, by the way, because he's calling on his cities to clear the homeless encampments. Democrat California Governor Gavin Newsom called on cities to ban homeless encampments from public property using billions in state funding as leverage, because he wants the narrative to come out and not be there when he goes to run for the presidency. And the Democrats are still completely leaderless at this point because, let's face it, they're focus testing everybody they're trying to run right now. They're trying to run Bernie and AOC and now Newsom. They want to run Mayor Pete. Slotkin was on the list. I think that she went nowhere, though. I don't think that she won the means, or the means test. But it's just they keep popping these names back up to see if anybody jumps onto one of them the way that people jumped onto Trump back in the day. And they're trying to get some of the controversies out of the way to do so. Watch for big things like this again, too, as they go. Let's see. The big one that I wanted to put on things that I hate today comes to us from the Gateway Pundit, which I don't typically use, and that's why I didn't put this on the main article, but the Gateway Pundit reporting that Labor Department claims of hundreds of thousands of jobs created by Biden were fake. The article comes with that, but I mean, we all know that this is out there. Now, we heard a large amount about all the jobs that were created under Biden. We heard a lot of this throughout Biden's years, like, hey, excuse my language in advance, but it's almost noon Central Time, so I think I can get away with it at this point. Hey, dumb fuck. Stop pretending the economy is bad. I don't care that you can't afford groceries right now. Stop pretending the economy is bad. The economy is great. So just do that. Just pretend that you're not struggling right now and vote for Democrats, otherwise evil Donald Trump. And we got a lot of that, and I think people were pissed off about it. I do. The claim was 400,000 jobs between July and September, and almost none of those existed at that point. They got revised down every quarter. I mean, we probably lost 250,000 jobs just on revision alone, because they continue to get revised down, and that posted on top of, like I said before, New Deal style hiring in the federal government. Because, hey, as long as these people are employed, the unemployment rate stays down. We might not need these jobs right now, but we might need them out in the future somewhere. So we'll just create the jobs to stimulate the economy, and if we can't afford it, then we go back and raise the taxes. All right. Last one on things that I hate, and then we'll do some things that I like. This is just idiots towing things at this point. Improperly towed vehicle swings in Houston's road lanes because, well, people are stupid. I both hope and hope that there isn't. I hope there is and hope there isn't somebody in this driver's seat. I'll explain why after we watch the video of a person towing a Saab down the highway backwards, which was the dumbest part of it, and watching it go back and forth down the highway. Those of you on the audio platform, I apologize, you're not going to be able to see any of this.
popped up on your social media feed. An improperly chained vehicle swerves in and out of the lanes on the 610 North while being towed by a white SUV. Now, what's even crazier was there was actually someone inside of the vehicle being towed, going all over the place. Fox
Okay, that answered that question.
For joining us live from along 610. Leslie, this is just a wild story from start to finish here.
Yeah, wild story indeed. So the vehicle's actually exited just behind me here at 610 and Ella, but the man that was actually in that blue vehicle that you saw swerving in and out of the lanes there was actually taken into custody. Now, the blue car is seen chained improperly to the back of a white SUV swerving in and out of lanes. And according to Houston police, around 2:50 Monday, they were called to 1919 North Loop West for a traffic hazard. HPD says there was a stalled vehicle, which is the blue car, in the moving lane of traffic. No injuries were reported when they arrived. However, HPD says they ran the plate of the driver of the stalled vehicle, and he has a warrant out for his arrest in DeKalb County, Georgia. HPD says his name is Dante Brown, and he is 32 years old. And we spoke to a witness. His name is Steve Nolan, who says he was going to the store on the feeder road where I'm standing and saw police lights. Take a listen.
Then I saw there was a car that was facing the wrong way on the feeder road, and there was a white truck in front of it, and it had a chain that was attached to the car. But before I pulled into the other lane, I did see a tow truck that pulled out, and then he pulled into the parking lot of the hospital. I didn't see him after that.
Now, HPD says the girlfriend who was driving the white SUV has not been taken into custody at this time. Reporting from Northwest Houston.
All right, physics friends.
Fox 26 News.
Why did this happen? I'm sure that many of you can come back
You might
and...
have seen popped up on your social media.
Why did this happen, you guys? I can tell you why. Completely improperly towed
Now, there are signs that recent college graduates may be facing a tight...
Shut up. The problem of the matter is that when the steer tires are on the ground and there's no lock in place, no locking mechanism at all in place, then yes, those wheels can go anywhere and everywhere. And centrifugal force means that, yes, they can swing back and forth, and as they swing, then they'll turn back out to compensate. Now, person being in the vehicle, of course, was necessary because anybody who's done the redneck tow before understands the fact that if you're towing somebody by a tow strap, then the towed vehicle is the brakes. So you don't do it when there's no brakes in it, but yeah. The towed vehicle is the brakes. The person in the pulling vehicle doesn't touch the brakes at all and just lets the towed vehicle be the one to slow everything down. But you also do that going forward, not backwards, with the person in the towed vehicle with their hands firmly on the wheel because of that. And towing it from the back like that, there's no... I don't want to meet the person who's strong enough to go back and hold that. To hold that steering wheel going through this, so because that person is going to be a lot bigger than me, I can tell you that. And clearly the person who was in the driver's seat was not that person, so idiots towing things. Let's do some things that I like. See the music back up here, even though I'm going to watch another video here in just a second. Where's my live chat? There it is. Alright, let's do some things that I like. So, we've got the poster. The new King of the Hill revival is set to drop, according to them, in 10 days, even though there's a sneak peek coming out 15 days from now. So I don't think they're actually going to drop in 10 days, but Squirrel Tactics, who, by the way, if you like King of the Hill, you should go and check out. He's really good at what he does with that stuff. Did a bit of an analysis on the new trailer, so I listened to this already, and I wanted to share this one with you. So here is a couple minutes of analysis of the trailer, or I'm sorry, the poster rather, for King of the Hill, the revival. And I actually will be right back while we do this. Okay, there's my cursor.
Hey folks, okay, so today an official poster was released for the revival. This poster right here.
Drink it in, man.
It's a pretty poster. We get to see how the guys are going to look after the time jump. Now, it's supposed to be an 8 or 9 year time jump, making Bobby around 21 and Hank and the guys would be around 50. And yeah, I can see this as 50-year-old versions of the guys. And if you look around, you'll notice that they went out of their way to show that it's probably set in the present day, with the delivery drone surprisingly delivering alcohol, a 5G cell tower that I'm sure Dale has all kinds of theories about, or maybe he's the one that's strangely calm about it, who knows. We see a Megalo Eats container on the back of a vehicle. I'm guessing that's some kind of food delivery. Maybe Hank can finally get his meatloaf sandwich from the Arlen Barn.
The Arlen Barn, best meatloaf in the county, and now serving sandwiches.
Or at least one that possibly doesn't have a bite taken out of it. It's unclear if Bill ordered the food, delivered the food, or, knowing Bill, possibly both. I could definitely see Bill doing something like DoorDash or Grubhub or Uber Eats, which is what I figure Megalo Eats is a parody of. He looks a little older and heavier, but seems like his hairline is still pretty much holding out where it was. Boomhauer looks to be glued to a tablet. He's graduated from Ginny Cam, I can tell you that. And of all the guys, as far as we can see, he looks like he has aged the most. Yeah, that time skip looked like it was a hard time for old Boomhauer. We can't see much of how Dale's aged due to him wearing a VR headset, but it is interesting that he's holding a vape rather than a cigarette. So it seems Dale may have finally put the coffin nails down. How much you want to bet that vape is made by Manitoba? You know they're going to figure out a way to get his money. Dale also has traded in his normal Mack truck hat, or the sometimes used Mason mower hat, for what looks like a rip-off Bass Pro Shop hat that simply says Bait Shop. Hank looks like a slightly older Hank. He's wearing a shirt more like Hal, so yeah, I wonder if he'll show up. And if nothing else, it looks like they're still drinking Alamo beer. I'm also guessing from the top of the umbrella in the background that they still have the same patio set and they were never able to fully upgrade to the Gatsby collection as they'd hoped to. Down here, I see what looks to be a scooter. I'm thinking it might be one of those rentable scooters that somehow end up everywhere, typically because of teenagers. I don't have much first-hand experience with them because my city doesn't have them, but I dealt with them and their teenage show-off riders in Denver once on a trip, so yeah, they were annoying, and it seemed like everybody other than the people riding the scooters hated the scooters. South Park did a funny episode about it. We still don't have an official air date yet. IMDb says May 25th, but I don't see that happening considering there is a sneak peek event coming up on May 30th where
So, and I can catch up with this. I did have to step away for a sec because I've been holding it for an hour. A lot of stuff that I think is going to have changed here. I think it's interesting, of course, that Toby Huss is now going to be the voice of Gribble, so that'll be an interesting swap for that. I don't know, and I saw in some of the comments on this particular video that they might do like what they did with Redcorn, where they had Aaron, the initial voice actor, who had passed away in a car accident right after the filming, or I'm sorry, right after the release, but for the first couple episodes of filming. He passed away, and then they picked up, I can't think of the name of the guy who voices Redcorn otherwise, but they picked up the new actor for that. So they might do that and let Hardwick be the voice of Gribble for the first couple episodes so we can get the voice lines recorded. But, I mean, there's going to be a lot of good changes for this one. I have actually got high hopes for this. I think this is going to wind up being good just based on some of the sneak peeks and things that have come out on this one already. So kind of looking forward to it. Kind of looking forward to seeing it. Other things that I like. I wanted to... Actually, we'll take the new music back off of this because I'm going to do this background style off of this. I've had a song that I've heard in a couple of other places that I wanted to share out with you because of my experience with suicide prevention especially. So, and those of you that are watching the video platform can see that it's a topic that hides in the shadows. This is a song, appears to be a collaboration between Carrie Underwood and Papa Roach, artists that I don't typically listen to by myself, but I wanted to share this with you. The song is called Leave a Light On, and I mean, it's a poetic approach. It doesn't expressly talk about the topic that we probably can't talk about on YouTube, but it still comes out and it tells a story. I know I'm talking over the music behind me right now, which I have really low for, copyright situations, but I'm going to read a little bit of this just because I understand, and I've been there more often than I will even admit to in my life. And I understand the fact that it's easy to come back out and feel like there is no help for you at all when you do. It's part of the reason I don't use Facebook except to broadcast to. Like, you'll never see me post there or sit and read posts as I go through because, it's supposed to be where friends connect. And I knew the situation where I withdrew from life and nobody reached out to me, even though people have known for years that I was struggling with it. So I choose not to associate with those people anymore. But it's not like me to worry, but when I see you fading in the dark, I'll leave a light on for you. Through the long nights, I will be right there for you. If you drift too far, I'll leave a light on for you. And it's a sentiment that I have for a lot of people. I do know some people who are still in the midst of struggle with that. It's something I wish I'd been there for myself at the time. I know I'm better off than where I was at the time. And, I mean, realistically, it started right before I met most of you who are watching this video. Before I started putting content out was where I was suddenly able to, and it was a very sudden shift for me, but where I was able to be better and understand my own life. So, again, artist is Papa Roach, featured female singer is Carrie Underwood. Leave a Light On. Go give it a listen. We'll take that down before I get copyright popped off of that, even though, again, talking over the top of it. All right. A couple other things that I like. A big one that I like, of course, comes to us from the EPA's new leader, Lee Zeldin. EPA Administrator targets stop-start vehicle tech. Everybody hates it. From Nathan Bomey. Axios reporting the Trump admin is targeting climate technology that automatically turns vehicles' engine off when it's stopped to save fuel. Stop-start technology has become a common feature in new vehicles as a way to save a few bucks on gas and reduce emissions, even though I think it actually makes your fuel economy go down. I know that fuel injection has changed a lot of this, but it still takes usually a little bit more fuel to start a vehicle once it's stopped than it does for a short stop at a stoplight. Now, if you're sitting in stop-and-go traffic and stop for an hour, not moving, etc., I mean, at that point, you've put your car in park and turned it off anyway, so. But stop-start technologies, yeah, it's not for me. And I know why they did it, too, by the way. It has nothing to do with saving a few bucks on fuel. They tout it as that because they say, again, that it'll stop your engine so you're not burning fuel while you're sitting at the stoplight for 30 seconds or whatever the hell it is. You know what it's actually there for? It's there to make it sound dumb when a person who has a piped truck sits at the stoplight and instead of hearing the it just stops and sits there silently, and then you hear when it starts back up as it goes. So that's what it's there for, to try to put some of that stuff down, and people not doing performance stuff. But they marketed it as a way, and just like I said with EVs, I will put the caveat to this one. The caveat that goes with this is the fact that it should still be an optional feature. And yes, dealerships should put vehicles out there, both with and without the stop-start functionality to it. and advertise the fact that it's got stop-start. So let the people decide, make the decision for themselves. Give them the option. Say, hey, here's Malibu. We'll use that as an example. That's got stop-start technology. Here's one without. Do you want it or not? They're the same color. They're the same price. Make your pick. Take your pick. I think it should still be optional. I don't think it should be as, quote, standard equipment as it's been lately. Like, you can't find an F-150 that doesn't have it now. So, that's the way that I look at it. And I think that's where we're going to cut it for the day. I think that's where we're going to be done. So, let's head out of here for the day. Give one quick last look at the live chat. I think that's it, though. I think the last one is going to be Quest Banning thanking us for the updates. So let's throw some outro music up and let's head out of here for the day. Can't find my cursor again. There it is. I gotta change the offset on my screens, because I think that's part of it, is because I think in the Windows setting, even though the left-hand screen is sitting up higher, I think it's officially lower in the Windows screen. So I think I got to move that up a little bit. But that is for off-screen stuff. Here's for on-screen stuff. Thank you, everybody who came by and hung out in the live chat and came and made everything better and talked about what it is that you needed to talk about. We'll be back here next week for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. It's going to be a great time. Hopefully, I'm really hoping that at some point here, we get this kind of a news week that only goes for 2 hours, that doesn't have every single thing thrown at the wall to see what sticks, and stuff that we have to go back and skip, and really that kind of stuff. So I'm probably not going to get my hope. I mean, I've already cut stuff because of the fact that I can't keep up with it, but we will see you here next time for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. Stick around if you're on the Twitch side. We're going to go find my friend Steven. Otherwise, we will see you here for, well, no gaming this week because there's other stuff that's got to be done. And take care. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you next week. Again, hopefully a little bit slower of a news week, because I can't keep doing this for 4 hours at a time. So, have an awesome one. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.